Hello and welcome to At the 57, your home for clutch Waterloo Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong name, though. Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics breaking down another electric week of OUA action. As you know, we were in the house for all four of them. We're going to take you through our experiences being live and direct. So great to see all the folks that were making out to the games and everything else OUA and U Sports football related. But first and foremost, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing so well, my man. The 57 doesn't quite roll off the tongue as well as the 55 does, but have to shout out what an incredible kick that was. And obviously, we'll get into all the action. But man, we talk about it before, and there's obviously a lot of people with a lot of feelings about OUA TV and that. Even if OUA TV, TSN, Sportsnet, whoever decided to cover these games and do great jobs with that, there's still no better feeling than being live in person for these football games. What amazing atmospheres you and I got a chance to be a part of.
Absolutely. And we'll take you through all those things, and we're going to give out our shout outs off the jump just to make sure that we highlight the players that made this week so spectacular. And we're going to start on the special team side of things, and it'll be no surprise where we go here, but we're going to start with, we got some shout outs, I think, across the board before giving our official player of the week. So Tom, who's our shout out, and then who's taking home special teams player of the week for us?
I mean, the shout out of the week has got to go to my guy in Braden Masseri. He's returning kickoffs, he's doing all this, but he's punt blocking in that outstanding Western showcase. So special teams shout out of the week has to go to him.
You tricked me there a little bit because I was like, oh wait, I thought the shout out was going to another guy with a major punt block and then the scoop and score, and I was gonna get at you for calling him your guy because if anything, he's our guy and slightly more my guy because he's on my GG's in number 44 and Daniel Briere for in his first game back with the punt block, scoop and score going into the half. But either way you break, yeah, Masseri all over the field in terms of his special teams contributions and what he did on offense for them as well. So, hey, I love it. We got the two shout outs there. But of course, Tom, where are we going with the actual special teams player of the week?
It has to go to former Oakville Titan kicker, Evan Astafolo. He goes 4 for 6 on the day with a long of 57 yards to send the game into overtime and then to eventually win the game for the Waterloo Warriors. I mean, anytime you are, I believe, breaking a record, because I remember a few years ago, the 55 yard was the record at the time. So I'm pretty sure he broke another record with the 57. But anytime you do that, that's got to be the special teams player of the week.
Ice in his veins, true rookie. Just what an incredible moment. What a, finale to an outstanding nighttime affair at Varsity Stadium. We'll obviously talk about that game and everything else that went on that one. Tom, defensive player of the week. Similarly, we're given some shout outs, but the shout outs and the ultimate player of the week we're going to are staying within the same club, a game that you were live and direct for. Tom, what are we doing with this one?
So shout out of the week, it's kind of I don't know if you want to say a cop out or not, but the entire Laurier defensive secondary gets our shout out of the week. I mean, you've got guys all over the field. Malik Cote with one of his first catches ever, it sounds like, according to some of those coaches. He's got some stone hands, but a great interception where he actually ran the route for the receiver. And the amount of big hits that I saw from that entire group, Jahari Hastings coming downhill constantly, like it was incredible to see those guys operating at the very top of the level. So they get our shout out of the week for this one.
1000%. Well, let's move it from the defensive secondary down to the front seven because we're going to shout out a guy who was missing in action for them against Guelph due to his sister's wedding, but he spared no time in just picking up right where he left off. Tom, defensive player of the week, where are we going?
It's got to go to big man number 47, Marcus Tenney. He finishes with 2 big sacks on the day and probably should have had a couple more, but was dominating all day in the backfield, disrupting that great Windsor offense. So got to go to our guy, Marcus Tenney.
And of course, hey, shout out to Coach Faulds hooking us up with a little swag, wearing it here on the broadcast, as always, like with our fine folks out at Windsor. And, I'm wearing the Mount Allison shirt underneath. Maybe I'll pull it off at some point in the broadcast. You give us your swag, we'll rock it wherever we can. So thank you so much. Can't wait to talk about that one. You were live for that one. And, our first viewing of Windsor football and some really interesting notes from that one. Offensive player of the week. We're gonna first go to a shout out that our guy Dakota hates when we do these shout outs because it doesn't make for a great graphic, but man, oh man, you can't deny the rushing game that Western put on to my Guelph Griffins last night. So, Tom, who or what group are we shouting out for their efforts rushing the ball last night?
I mean, it's got to go to that Western offensive line. Anytime you can run against a good defense, and let's not get it twisted, Guelph has a good defense, but you put up 296 yards of rush just on that, like unbelievable. And I know we know them very well, but we got to give shout outs to all of them. Eric Anderson, number 61 at left tackle. You've got Keegan O'Neill, number 65 at left guard. Philip Cote, number 50 at right guard. I believe you've got Reed Cloutier at right tackle, number 62. And Braden, excuse me, trying to find his number here. Can't see him on the roster. I'm so sorry. Braden Hitchin, number 67 at right guard as well. So outstanding job and outstanding work by that entire Western offensive line.
And just when Kelly and Dolby in the second half broke off those 62 and 84-yard runs respectively for those major touchdowns, credit to them absolutely. And a large part of that was just Western leaning on Guelph. We're going to have a lot to say when we get to that one at the end of all of it. But our actual player of the week, and this one again, there's context to it because the numbers alone, there wasn't like a no doubter, just outstanding singular performance. But we're actually going to go back to the Laurier team. And Tom, where are we going with this? And explain the context of, again, why even if the numbers, there's a lot of guys who had games similarly to this guy, but just a little added context for what we saw in the box score if you weren't keeping an eye on the actual game.
Yeah, our offensive player of the week has got to go to Callum Wither, quarterback for Laurier. He finishes for 20 for 29, 237 yards, 2 touchdowns, a third one on the ground, and it does show 2 interceptions. But once again, why it's so important to watch these games and not just look at the box scores. Those interceptions were not his fault. He had a couple of them that were deflected. One of them was right off somebody's helmet. Like it goes back to him with those interceptions because yes, technically they were picked off, but really was not his fault. He probably should have had one, like you mentioned, because he threw one directly to Robert Springer and he just dropped it. But he still gets our offensive player of the week. He had a monster game.
It's kind of funny, like in many ways, the one pick that doesn't happen to Springer is then followed immediately with him hooking up with Ryan Hughes in the end zone. And then on the flip side, in the fourth quarter, he throws a gift to our guy Laomi in the end zone, who just couldn't haul it in. And then like the next play is like a screen pass that I forget if it's off of Tayshawn or Quentin Scott's hands. That's then that other interception. So on the whole, maybe it's the touchdowns are right, but probably one fewer interception. Either way, great job by Cal Wither. Really exciting to see, as you were highlighting last week, how he's really just picked up from where Taylor left off with this offense. And it's been incredible to see. Those are your players of the week. As always, who did you like this week? Specials, defense, and offense. Let us know who you would want to recognize. But we are going to start, Tom. We are bookending this podcast. So this is a rough weekend for us, brother. We're bookending this podcast with our alma maters, and we're starting in Ron Joyce, where the Queen's Golden Gales rolled into the Hammer and laid down the hammer on your McMaster Marauders. Final score, Queens 38, McMaster 4. Tom, when I was with our boy Dakota later on in the evening, we're at UofT, and he's watching the game, and he's saying, so is Mac really that bad? And we've had this conversation with a lot of these games, whether it was the UofT Carleton game, whether it's the 2 Guelph games, seeing them pick up losses, and this theme of how, as we just know is the case in sport and in life, not every loss is a catastrophe, and not every win is a magnificent performance or was by your own volition. My biggest thing coming out of this game, first time of the season, getting to watch Queens live against a team in Mac that we saw positive things against York, and a York team that we'll talk about briefly, but I think is enough of a litmus test that you can't just be like, well, you just did it against York. Like, again, York has some really good things going there. My biggest thing is that Queens looks really, really good. We knew that defense was going to be strong, especially in the linebacking core on the back end. We saw last week how with guys like Oliver Jackson and the like, they were able to sort of replace adequately those major pieces that left the program last year, and then the question mark about Vreekin, and he's looked so solid to me. And I know obviously for you just being the Mac guy in the house, your feelings are probably may vary a little bit, but my goodness, that's my biggest thing walking out of this is like we knew Mac wasn't in the same ballpark as Queens, and Queens just showed that they were the better team from the start through to the final whistle.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, when you look at this game and you're going into it, I'm looking at this as a Mac fan being like, it's actually a pretty terrible matchup just in terms of Queens' strengths and where Mac has kind of struggled here with this idea of like, even if you have what people have said is like a slow starting offense in the past couple of weeks for Queens, because that defense is so solid and so dynamic, you're constantly given more and more chances to get the engines going and get everybody revved up. And that's exactly kind of what happened here. I mean, in the first quarter, Queens ultimately, like you mentioned, puts up 38 points, but the first quarter, they only get 3. And that McMaster defense, I genuinely really like. I think they did a lot of really good things, especially in that part. But like, when you look at the offense, I mean, 151 yards of total offense on the day, including 42 on the ground. You're not moving the ball effectively. You're constantly going 2 and outs. And when you give you're not giving your defense any time to really rest and relax, eventually things are just going to start spiraling in that standpoint. So I liked what I saw from McMaster's defense. Queens' offense still has a ton of incredible players, as we've seen here and we'll get into. But if you can't keep your defense off the field so that they can rest afterwards, it's always going to happen like this.
And that's what we see year in, year out, the best teams do. To me, it reflected what we saw later on in that Western game, where just teams in a certain style of team. And we know that Queens and Western have a little bit of that Spider-Man meme, really want to establish it in the run game, in the trenches, and build outwards, is that's going to tire you out. And exactly to your point, when on the flip side, your offense isn't giving your defense the requisite breaks, yeah, you end up with those 38 points. And I jetted quickly after the game because I wanted to get back to Toronto for that nightcap. And you got to talk to some of the guys. And obviously, hey, we love our guy in Grandy. From the sounds of it, I don't want to, use your conversation with him of being like, of just, him being like, at the end of the day, 38 points is unacceptable. And in reality, you trying to frame it as being like, he's obviously never gonna like agree with what you're saying, at least not to us. But that piece, I'm like, yeah, but you weren't put in a great situation. But 1,000% to me, this starts with that Queens, like the strength of that Queens team. And we talked about it last week in terms of, and going into this week, of like the major difference being in the trenches. And against Western, as we said, I don't remember what Kasari ended up with, but we just knew, hey, look, you know that this is going to be one of, if not his worst game. Just like we expect so much better. And I want to start with that rushing attack. Kasari ends up taking the ball 14 times for 115 and a touchdown. And that's a really good day. It still is in that territory of being like, I'm not shocked when I see Kasari put up those types of numbers. The same that we've talked about that with some of the quarterback play that we've seen early on in the season of like, hey, it might be a small sample size, but given that we have a couple of years of sample size worth of data on you and evidence to how you play, maybe things are different this year, but that should be around where you're at. And then you get the added 36 yards from Isaiah Adams, Ethan Dahl with 25 yards and a touchdown. And ultimately, when you're able to do that and, just be able to just take advantage of the fact that, again, we love that linebacking core for your max squad, but on the front line, and it's such an interesting inverse where you had Queens O-line just really getting on those linebackers, those option plays they were doing with the power or trap look in the box to the quick screens, and just having these guys on their toes, running left and right. And then on the flip side, where you have seemingly Justin Pace just left to his own devices, seemingly unbothered because he has really good defensive linemen in front of him. I think, I don't think it's a crazy take that was like, hey, we called it right on this game. Like, I know that like, there was part of you that really wanted to, pull for your boys on this one, but I just from that angle alone, the way that Queens' O-line was able to establish the run, and how that run allowed Vreeken to be able to start working in some of those options, getting the ball in the hands of guys like Falcone and Jack Ashby Jacobs, really seeing them come onto the scene really strong this year, especially with Quamo not back for them. And then just how on the flip side, Queens in the front seven on that D line, controlling the line of scrimmage and just leaving the best linebacker in the country able to just make tackles. And you know what? He ends up with 10 total tackles, and we're leaving the game being like, that feels light, just based on how we actually saw him play in the game. I think we called it absolutely right. This one was going to be one in the trenches, and it absolutely was.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I actually, once again, to talk about that MAC defense just a little bit here, I actually really like some of the play of the D line in that first quarter. Once again, you're talking about like a big man like Greg Palmer, Malik Bolt actually did some good things. Like there was a lot of really good stuff that I saw from them, but it's just not sustainable if you're just going like that over and over again. And like you mentioned, Queens went into this with a 30 front for the majority of the time, but that 30 front consisted of Oliver Jackson, Stephen Capene, and then the big man in the middle, Eric Johnston, and they just ate up double teams. They demanded multiple offensive linemen to get on them. And when you're leaving Justin Pace unblocked, like the reason why I was surprised that he didn't have more tackles is because the tackles that he had were in such key moments. There was a time it was either a second down or a third down and goal from like the 1 yard line. Mac runs the ball and Pace shoots the gap completely untouched and tackles the running back, not even giving up an inch. It wasn't even like they fell backwards or he was pushed him into the backfield, and was such a big play. And he had a few of those in those key moments to the point where I saw him afterwards, like you mentioned, I was on the field, I grabbed him and was like, hey man, F you. You couldn't allow my voice just one thing. And he just started laughing. But yeah, he is one of, if not the best defensive player in the conference. And when you're not able to get bodies on him to block him because of the guys up in front, it's a recipe for disaster. And exactly like you said, this game was won in the trenches, first and foremost.
And I do love, though, that you gave the shout out to Palmer and to Bolt, because yeah, early on there was a few moments where I'm like, wait, who is 98, or I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, of being like, dang, nice play by him disrupting. But it's that same thing that when you start with that commitment in the box to run, pound the ball, all those types of things, you might be in a game early, but you're gonna, that's what's the line from Bane in the Dark Knight Rises or whatever? It's like, I wondered what was gonna break first, your mind or your body, right? But I want to talk about what we saw out of Mac offensively, from the standpoint of how they were actually trying to execute, because we saw when Thalman early on, he's making a couple quick hitters here and there. There was a really nice play we saw, sort of a speed out to, your guy in Jackson Taylor, and just getting the ball out. Because frankly, to Mac's credit, and in large part, it's exactly what you said. Queens wasn't really having to dial up too much crazy pressure, lighter boxes, this, that, and whatever. So like Thalman was getting time, and he's an athletic kid. He's able to step up and stuff. But almost similar to what our commentary was going back to Laurier Guelph week 1, of being like, it's all well and good for a QB to be sitting back there, and maybe you're feeling like, yeah, hey, if anything, we're getting good protection. A, how many guys are you actually protecting against? And B, it doesn't really matter if you're just unable to actually get the ball downfield to your guys. There seemed to be a distinction of when they were able to find success, and it probably was a bit earlier on as well, of just ball coming out quick, more of those timing throws, first read, second read, and then maybe he's taking off or whatever, versus when they were trying to do maybe some more deeper concepts to try to push the ball downfield. Yeah, he's sitting back there, but I mean, we know these guys in that secondary for Queens, whether it's Miller Melanson or Vanek, or Seaway, all these dudes. It's like, that's not going to be the way you can attack them ultimately. You're not going to have success there. How do you feel like 2 weeks into this against good defenses, both from York and from Queens, what Mac's identity is starting to become, and how, if Coach Hopkins were to give you a call and be able to say, like, Tom, you're watching all this stuff, what are you liking? How would you try to have us gain success? What would be the thing that you find is the most reliable for them right now?
I think I think there was a part of the game plan that is leaning right into what their real bread and butter is going to be. And I think it starts with some of those receivers like Everett Reed and Jackson Taylor and those guys and their route running abilities. I mean, we saw a couple of times where there were speed outs and it's a timing thing. And the moment you hit that, you give your guy an opportunity to be in open space and allow him to rip off some yardage or some to try to make a guy miss. And I think that's really where those timing routes and those timing plays has to be where Mac's offense, at least in the passing game, has to go with. Right now, especially against the Queens defensive secondary that's up there and some of the best in the entire conference, if not the country, sitting back and having 5 or 6 seconds is not really going to help you all that much when you've got guys who are able to just blanket receivers as they go. So tight windows and sharp timing is really what's going to get you best here. But I just we need to have an understanding of capabilities here and what's possible. You know, the one interception that Luke Thalman throws to Keegan Vanek is one of those same quick outs, but it's a field side throw. And so, best case scenario, you complete that. It's still a 5 yard gain, but you've thrown the ball 40 yards to try to get it to your receiver. And during that time, there's a lot of potential and a lot of time for a DB to get underneath that and pick that off, which is exactly what happened here. So I like the idea of, you know, using those quick outs, using those crossers like Mac loves to do so often and just use that timing side of things, but he has to be in the proper setting.
Let's finish off talking about the Dave Reekin had, because he finishes off 17 for 24, 257, 2 touchdowns, couple rushes here and there, gets 23 on the ground. And as we said, a similar day just by the numbers to what Cal Wither did, similar to what Evan did, Tristan Aboud while he was healthy in the Guelph game. A lot, like that was kind of like that the very similar stat line across the board. Love the way Nez was dialing up these option plays for him just to be able to put the McMaster, whether it was a half or a will linebacker in conflict if they wanted to commit to the run. And if so, he'd get it out to his receivers. Falcone with a really nice day. Ashby Jacobs getting to see Tuioti live and recognizing just, you know, we were kind of talking about, you know, we obviously know Dankers is a big dude listed at tight end, and Tuioti is listed as that H-back dude for him, but just kind of has that like tight end look to him, and really exciting to see what they can probably do with him, leaking Kasari out of the backfield as well, to try and get into their passing attack as well. I love the way, and I'm biased because I love the man, I love the way Nez was dialing up and putting Vreekin in a position to make, I don't want to call them easy decisions, but like simple enough decisions of like, here's your read, make a play, just get the ball out to your guys. Loved what we saw from them offensively, and just again, so nice. Just 2 weeks in, aside from that minor health scare we saw at the end of the first half against Western, Vreekin looking like the guy that, you know, we've seen at times when he's healthy, and just being consistent, because we know so much on this Queens team is great. So you don't need him to be competing for the OUA MVP. Right now, he's making all the right plays. He's not losing them, putting them in his position to lose games. And again, he's making this offense so much more well-rounded than it could have been if they had to rely solely on Kasari.
Completely. And I mean, when you look at the capabilities that this man has and how well he's able to throw the ball down the field, I mean, when you've got guys, like you mentioned, receivers who are stepping up, like Nathan Falcone and Jack Ashby Jacobs, to really be these guys, it makes your life a little bit easier. But I think he's obviously a great quarterback, and especially when he's in the pocket, he has time. But you and I were commenting, like, some of the throws that he's made on the run are some of the best that we've seen. I mean, his mechanics when he's doing that, he looks unbelievable. And the completions that his receivers, they've obviously practiced this a whole bunch, but my goodness, he's almost more dangerous when he's out of the pocket than when he is in the pocket. So when you have such capabilities from that standpoint, it just means your offense, especially in your passing game, can just explode at any moment.
It's the effortless arm strength to me that it just is so impressive, especially when he's off platform. Shout out to your guy. I'll sneak in a little my guy as well in there. Michael Horvat punting the heck out of the ball. I mean, it's truly like he will make you a believer in the adage that kickers are football players too when you watch him punt that ball. And what was it, the safety that they got in the first half where you were like, that's entirely on Horvat flipping the field, push them back deep. I mean, the young man's clearly on his way to another, possible all Canadian bid. So hey, shout out to that guy. Tom, final thoughts sort of across the game with this one, that just from being there, whether it was conversations you had after the fact. Hey, great seeing our dude in Eric Colonna out of the game with his pick six athletics, or I hope I'm not getting the branding wrong, but just with the work he's doing, trying to build DBs, and of course being a Queens alum. So cool to see him after the game, supporting his Golden Gales and promoting his business. But just final thoughts on this matchup.
I think the storyline here to me is that Mac offense really struggled for sure. Needs to figure some stuff out. I mean, I liked a lot of the stuff that I saw last week against York here, with the run game, and Luke Thalman looked really sharp. But this, to me, the ultimate story of this is that Queens really is that team. They are a team near the top. They are a team that's ready to make a push. And I think this was just them just really showcasing it.
And we obviously saw last week in that 4OT thriller that they can hang with the Western Mustangs. They show that they can take care of business against a team that is weaker than them. And we are going to see them against the other top team in the league when they host the Laurier Golden Hawks Friday night from Richardson Stadium, 6:30 p.m. kickoff. I'm not going to make any promises for you, but there's a good chance Tom's in the house for that one. I don't know if I'm going to make it out to Kingston at 6:30, finishing up a school day in Toronto at 3:30. But just a great way to go into the weekend. A little OUA action on the TV. Mac getting the bye. Again, I know we joke about me being the hater. I do see the promise in just the people in that building right now and what we're starting to see. I'm not surprised that they couldn't hang with them. It's again, it's not me taking a shot at that program. I'm excited, really excited to see how Mac fares when they're in games against some of those teams that we think are a little bit more in their neighborhood, and still love what we saw against York. And I don't think that was an outlier. Let's move in to the game that York was participating in. They took their talents on the road to the nation's capital to take on the Ottawa GG's. Final score in this one, Ottawa 39, York 17. Tom, this was a game that, early on, I was so happy seeing the way that Ottawa was moving the ball. And a big reason why I ended up picking Ottawa in this one was that there was just so many question marks with that York defense, a couple question marks on the offense as well, question marks on that defense, especially in the linebacking core, that it's just, when you think about the talent that Ottawa has on offense, specifically thinking about what, Charles Asselin, but then Soliman Kamara as developing into a really strong runner in his own right, let alone all the great receiving options that they have out there, and what we like about Josh Jansen, who, similarly throw him into the category. We talked about Regan, all those other guys, 17 for 28, 249, 2 touchdowns. It's just like, that was like, if you started as an OUA quarterback this week, you were probably getting a line similar to that. And I loved that early on, they were able to march the ball down the field. They were taking their shots when needed, but just coming off that Waterloo game where, hey, look, we'll talk about K-Mac and that defense when we get into the one of the two nightcaps. But so happy to see them come out early and just show that they could move the ball, even when they didn't finish with sixes. And, they had that one penalty that took back a touchdown. They had to settle for the field goal. Really nice to see against the defense that's banged up, has a great guy calling it up for them, and your guy and Coach Knox showed what we know that Ottawa should be able to do. And frankly, with still even maybe a little bit of room of saying, like, I still think they're going to get better as an offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I really liked what I saw from this Ottawa squad. I mean, I was texting you when I was rewatching this, just being so angry at York, man. Like, this was a team that I'm gonna stick with the Ottawa side first, but Josh Jansen really is starting to look like the Jansen that we've seen in spurts or in parts in previous seasons here. 17 for 28, like you mentioned, 249 yards and 2 touchdowns is a great stat for that beginning of the season. And really, while he had some great throws, I think it was his receivers that really did some great stuff. I mean, Noah Avery on the day, 8 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown. Robin Couillard, 3 catches for 59, including a 38-yard long touchdown. Really impressed with what I saw. Romeo Lucier and Cordua as well. I like this Ottawa receiving core a lot. I think they're going to do some great things. And now we're starting to see. We talked about a little bit about it last year, about I don't know if he was quite ready or quite there, but Suleiman Kamara, really starting to come into his own here as well. Nine attempts for 84 yards. The King himself, King Charles, 12 attempts for 80 yards. Like, this is starting to really look like a potent Ottawa offense that's got a lot of great contributors to it. So I'm excited to see the growth of this team and where they can really go.
Absolutely. Firstly, as an aside, because I know he's listening to this whenever it does come out later on today, Dave Martin, I wasn't ignoring your phone call. I'm recording a podcast right now. I'll call you back later, but you'll clearly have heard me call you back before you hear this. But shout out to you, Dave Martin. Shout out to London South Football. You're absolutely right. And this is why coming out of last week, to me, I'm saying, yes, I did put that challenge on Ottawa to say, come out the gate doing what you should be able to do. And they didn't quite, but they got the win and they were relatively healthy and still able to look at like, well, this should get better. This should get better. Progress against a team in New York that, yes, banged up, but I do think is a better opponent than Waterloo. You're back home. That's great to see. And as we always talk about with Ottawa, what makes them so transcendent has always been on the defensive side of the ball. And I know we haven't talked about the York piece of it yet, but obviously seeing Daniel Briere back in the middle for them, adding on to the fact that he has that incredible punt, block, scoop, and score, which I know you had some feelings about as far as like the game management piece of it in terms of like, even allowing that opportunity to happen. But an Ottawa defense that we always are looking at that secondary, and rightfully so, and obviously still with guys like Pat Cumberbatch and Denny Ferdinand, but really liking what Nicolas Dion at safety was doing for them. A really big breakup early on in the game. And on the front side, we know that Hildebrandt is one of the dudes, the dude of all dudes in the middle. And he ends up with one sack on the day, adds on to the, I think it was 1.5 against Waterloo, which again, a true interior guy we're talking about right now. And times where he was just blowing right through that York offensive line. And then you add in a really nice day, a great day from Louis Prince at, I think more of the one technique, if I remember that, or maybe I can't remember exactly, but just another defensive lineman who, as we've talked about year after year, going back to having, President's Trophy winners and President's Trophy like runner-ups and linebackers, some of the great defensive backs of all time. I'm saying like they really have lacked that presence of a strong pass rush that maybe put a bit too much on their linebacking core. And we know Hildebrandt's that guy, but great seeing Prince step up and just, Ottawa just looking like what we expect Ottawa to look like, a team that is well coached, that is well disciplined. And with Coach Posé on the defensive side of the ball, you know that you're going to be solid there. I guess, like, again, this is why I fell in love with Ottawa football a couple years back. Just a reliable product. None of the like, they are such an antithesis of their crosstown rivals in Carleton. Such an antithesis. Because frankly, I'm sorry, Carleton, you were thinking that you were going to get away this weekend without us talking about you. I apologize. But just purely on talent, you might you might lean towards the Carleton side, but you know that this Ottawa team is going to they aren't going to lose games. They're not going to win every game, but they won't be the reason they lose games. Marc Dijonay Rondeau, another great guy on that secondary as well. So love what they did defensively, and just again, so indicative of why this Ottawa team is solid year in and year out.
Yeah, it just comes down to execution, and they're solid at execution across the board. And sometimes they don't have the biggest names or anything else, but the execution always seems to be there. And that's exactly what comes from a guy like Marcel Belfay, who's been in the CFL and all of that. But to me, this game, it really came down to the trenches, especially against that York offense, against this Ottawa GG defense. I mean, Riley Hildebrandt and Prince were just in the backfield all day. They were disrupting things. They really, I mean, you see Melkus Alunga getting 12 attempts for 70 yards, and kudos to him, but there were so many times where he just got stuffed in the backfield. I mean, the other leading rusher is Keegan Hall, who took off and ran with it a few times, including a long of 37, but they really weren't able to get a whole lot done on the ground. Keegan was constantly getting hit. I mean, we know how good he is, and with Keegan Hall, 18 for 29, 149 yards, albeit 2 touchdowns, that's a slow day for him. And I'm recognizing my own bias, but this is why I'm not a fan of the no huddle offense. because to me, I always like the idea of let's get everybody huddled up, let's get everybody on the same page, let's know 100% what we're doing here and come out. And I know that the no huddle is designed so that you're still supposed to be able to do all of that, albeit now the defense is in front of you and you can kind of dissect what's happening here. But to me, it's always been more important that the offense is on the same page no matter what, rather than trying to catch the defense offside because they're trying to read something or you're trying to read them. So I'm not a huge fan of this. Obviously, Coach Dennison is a much smarter man than I am, and Keegan Hall is one of the best quarterbacks. And so if there was ever going to be a time you could do this, it would be here. But I'm just saying I wouldn't mind seeing what this offense could look like if it was a proper huddled up offense. Everybody's there. Now, are missing key guys who are injured here. I think no Nicholas Adair in here was a big loss for this team as well. So yeah, there's give and takes here, but man, I'm just so frustrated with York. I was really hoping to see something more from them, and at times for this offense, it seemed like Keegan Hall was willing this team down the field by either taking off and running with it or just trying to fit balls into where his receivers were.
And obviously, no Avonte McCoy either, which is a huge blow for them. The no huddle piece, it's interesting. I take your point. I think on the broadcast, I think there was a bit of, they were trying to sort of kind of hammer home this part of like, you're going with this kind of hurry up offense, and then if you're going 2 and outs, then it's not giving your defense time to rest. And I'm like, as I'm listening, because I kind of was just listening to the broadcast in the car coming home from Hamilton, I'm being like, well, there's a difference between them running hurry up and just running no huddle. Like, they're not rushing. So though I take your point as well of everyone being on the same page, like, they're just giving Keegan all the time in the world to be able to communicate to his guys. York is very lucky that they got out of that home opener with the win. Because to say the least, they are a few key plays here and there from being 0-2 right now with all the talent. And I look at Keegan, and you read off the numbers, and they don't knock your socks off. They're more than what we expect from him. But whether it's a product of still needing to get a bit of rhythm with some of these guys, obviously they're dealing with injuries. As you said, Adair is there's no one on this team, let alone specifically on the offense, he has as much chemistry than with the guy that he came to York with from Mac. And so not having that reliability, but you're still seeing a couple bad drops here and there for guys. And this is the thing where it's the commentary that we're having about a lot of these teams that we expect highly of. It'll be similar when we talk about Guelph later on, of how it gets late quickly in the OUA. And I still believe in this offense because Keegan is making all the right reads. He's making all the right throws. And I do feel like there is good to great talent around him, new systems, everything like this, that it should be able to work, right? And we've seen it in that MAC game when we were able to march the ball. I think it was their first drive in the second half, leading to that their first touchdown, I believe it was, where they're advancing it. And so I still sort of believe conceptually in what they can do. It'll be interesting to see, though, just whether it's a chemistry thing, whether it's the sheer fact that like it's strange. And again, I never O-line run game, this is where my bread is buttered. But it's strange to think that like maybe like a jump at quarterback that's almost like too big a jump. You'd think like, oh, we got a great quarterback, it's going to make everyone better. And it certainly will. But I have to imagine, and for the receivers or people who know that aspect of the game better, please correct me if I'm wrong or add your feedback on this, of being able to say, there's a certain aspect of when you don't play with a guy who can, let's go back to the Luke Thalman piece. When you're talking about those field outs, right? And that's a tough throw because that ball's going to be in the air for so long. And that maybe as a receiver, if you have that field out and you're thinking, hey, I'm just here to occupy this low third so that we can actually make this throw or whatever. When you all of a sudden are playing with a guy where it's like, why did you stop running? I put that ball exactly where it needed to be, outside leverage, so the defender, whatever, couldn't get to it. And you're like, I'm sorry, I've literally never played with someone who could make that throw. Yeah. So for all those reasons, I still have belief in them. They need to get healthier on the defensive side, or it's not going to matter a lick. And obviously, offense, they still need to get healthy as well. But I just do feel like even if they were all healthy, there was still going to be a gelling process with this offense, with this team as a whole, well, more so on the offensive side. hopefully for York, and I hope so just personally as well, because as we talk about, the OUA is better when York and when U of T and Waterloo, the teams that over the last couple of years have been missing playoffs and such, are competitive. The OUA is better. I think that potential is still there. The question is whether they'll get healthy and get gelling with enough time for it to be meaningful. I'm not saying the sky is falling on York. It's all there for them to be able to take. Tom, final thoughts from this game? Any other observations that you made about on the Ottawa or York side that really caught your attention?
Yeah, I think on with York's defense, the thing that I'm really looking at is the injuries, especially at linebacker that they have. No Peyton Ryder, no Brody Clark, and while Austin Daisy is still a great linebacker, he did a lot of good things here. Having your top two leading tacklers from last year both be out in this setting, especially Brody Clark, who Knox does so much with, and either dropping back into coverage or setting off of blitzes. And once again, we mentioned Kirill Niari was the guy who filled in for him, and he still did solid, but missing those guys is really a big blow to this defense as well. And unfortunately, well, one of the big things that was happening here is that Knox is consistently having to try to send pressure, 6, 7, 8-man pressures in order to try to get something on Josh Jansen here. And when you're not able to do that, you leave your DBs in one-on-one coverage. And like we already mentioned, having outstanding receivers like Noah Avery, Romeo Lucier, Couliot, and Kadua, it's a recipe for disaster pretty quickly here. So I think this York squad is dealing with a lot of injuries. I think they still need to find some kind of identity for them. I think there's a lot of potential here, but I got to see more.
And frankly, not to get ahead of the week 3 preview podcast, that's a big reason where, for me, thinking about Red Blue Bowl Battle of Toronto, Argo Cup, Matt Dean's Bowl coming up next week on September 6th, and with the way UofT's clearly established, they're going to move the ball offensively. If this York team isn't healthier on the defensive side of the ball, I don't see how they're going to be able to keep up, like literally keep up with what UofT wants to do. And exactly to your point, if that's then affecting whether they're able to bring pressure and you're able to have Barnett sitting back there, it's going to be interesting to see. I hope for the sake of my picks, we're able to learn a little bit about the health status of those York Lions. But one way or the other, hey, again, I still think if you're a York fan out there, it's disappointing. Obviously, so happy that you got that win against Mac, but the talent's there. You need to get healthy, let it all gel. As we said, York is going to be hosting UofT in the Red Blue Bowl, a Battle of Toronto Argo Cup, Matt Dean's Bowl next Saturday, 1 p.m. kickoff from York Lions Stadium. Ottawa hitting the road to take on the Western Mustangs, their first true challenge of the season. No offense to York, no offense to Waterloo, but obviously for Ottawa being in that territory of saying like, hey, something to prove, this is where it's now that opportunity, win or lose. You've given yourself the cushion with that 2-0 start to the season. You've earned the right to be able to say, hey, let's at least come out of that game, win or lose, showing that we can play with those teams. We showed that in a playoff game against Guelph on the road last year. Let's show that we're still that team and we're ready to, at least be the team that no one wants to see coming into their house. Because that's sometimes a fun space to occupy, even if it doesn't end up with you lifting up trophies necessarily. But love what we saw out of Ottawa. Still believe in York. Let's pivot now to the second game you were in the house for, live from Waterloo. The Laurier Golden Hawks opening up their home campaign against the Windsor Lancers, coming off the week 1 bye, which again, just for the Windsor folks out there, I mean, we've joked about it like, whose toes did you step on to get this schedule? But Laurier picks up the dub at home. Final score, the Golden Hawks 24, Windsor 9. Tom, I don't want to set too much up off the jump from my own perspective because you were there watching it. At the end of the day, we've talked about already how great that Laurier defense was. To no surprise, that defensive secondary. Our guy Harnour, though, going down, though. Oh, my God. Does my heart just sink into my stomach thinking about if whatever that is that took him off, if it's anything other than just a precautionary whatever, because, oh my goodness. And again, coming from that Ottawa defense tree. So again, just thinking about Ottawa defense, just to sneak that in there again. But oh my goodness, Tom, take it whatever direction you want to go. Obviously, Laurier looked at offensively. Liked what we saw from Windsor, kind of, at least in terms of a lot of the questions we had about this team, not seeing them in week 1. Clearly not good enough to be able to, take this one home. But Tom, take it away. You were there live and direct. You were up in the press booth. You were dapping it up with guys on both sides of the ball. You were witness to almost a Donnybrook at the end of the game. What was it like being live in the house for Laurier's home opener?
Well, first and foremost, before anything else, thank you to the Laurier staff, Dan Polishchuk in particular. Obviously, anytime I get a chance to see my guy in Jack Moore, it's always a great thing. And my God, to pull a line from Dodgeball, that flow that Jack has looks feathered and lethal. My goodness, he looks like a stud, even more so than he normally does. So shout out to him. But it's always such a good time when I get a chance to go to Laurier and seeing everybody, getting a chance to finally speak to the Don in person and a few of those Windsor faithful. It was an awesome experience as well. But I feel for them in the environment that they're having to play games in because their stands haven't been delivered by the company they've been dealing with. So it's a tough spot. But to be honest with you, if you know anything about this Laurier coaching staff, being up against adversity is exactly where they want to be. And seeing this game, there's a number of things that I want to comment on. First and foremost here, obviously no Christopher John and no Joey Zorn for Windsor. You're thinking, what is that run game really going to look like? Mumbo and Andrew Delaney look fantastic. There were a number of times when they're going, I know Mumbo finishes with 6 attempts for 44 yards and Delaney 7 attempts for 43 yards. And you're saying, oh, Tom, what are you talking about here? But when you look at how they were running and what was happening, there was a lot of times where there was a design run, something like I'll give you an example. The very first play of the game, we've mentioned this before about Western and Queens, but it was that standard, here's the counter tray action where you've got the guard and the tackle who are pulling, but the actual action in the backfield has Mumbo going to the backside of this. So while Laurier's flowing with the offensive lineman, he's going to the backside to try to get to that edge. Now, Laurier immediately sniffs it out, and the defensive end, I believe it was La Quintana, goes right up there to cut that off. But Mumbo, showing his athleticism, is able to cut off of that, find another gap, and then still squeak forward for some yardage. And that happened consistently here, where Laurier is jamming up the initial spot. But because these guys are such great athletes, they're bouncing off of that and finding other avenues here. So I really think a lot of this Windsor run game, I think it's really going to explode this year. It's just having 3 weeks of training camp and then coming out against arguably the best team in the conference. That's tough. That's a tough thing to deal with, but I really like that to just start things off.
Well, and I think we were talking about it driving out to London yesterday, where later in the game, Mambo number 5 spins out of, I think, a would-be Jahari Hastings tackle, and again, looking like, the most evasive guy in the OUA, but, there comes 28 Malik Cote to clean it up. Maybe I'm messing up who was where, whatnot. And as you were commenting, we've talked about with, obviously, Coach Beardy, one of the best in the OUA, coaching up O-lines, and he's, been, if you don't believe me, just take a look at, the guys he's pumped out into the CFL over the last couple of years, and that was a part of concern for us. But with that caveat that that the Don and their staff are going to find the guys to fill them in, and then Beardy is going to replace them. And from the early returns, and obviously, as you highlighted, the rushing attack, though they were supremely challenged just against this Laurier defense, was looking strong. An O-line that was looking massive, maybe not as dominant as we've seen before, but I think there's still that potential for the Windsor fans in terms of everything that you were just highlighting and being able to say, okay, look, a lot of new faces in there. You start with the old adage of you can't teach the size. So you got that. And then you have on top of the fact a guy in Coach Beardy who's going to get him into the right shape and just doing the right things is, again, I think that is going to be an exciting thing to be able to watch. Now, of course, with Nick Domofsky, this was the big question mark, right? Was seeing him truly the guy, though it felt like that's sort of the direction they wanted to go, even when they were kind of flip-flopping, him dealing with injuries and everything like that. He goes 18 for 32, 224, no touchdowns, one interception, some really nice balls, some really good evasiveness, getting out of the pocket for 5 opportunities to pick up 27 yards. And as we've seen in years past, a slew of receivers who were, giving him opportunities to make plays. Obviously, Colby Ginn, I'll leave it to you because you were really excited about the things you were seeing. He's been in that program for a number of years, but then being able to see Tyreek Quason look like a really strong target for them in that passing attack. And Kareem Cotton, another one of the pipeline from Little Rock, Arkansas to Windsor, just to add on to the nicknames we call Windsor, from Wind City, the end of the 401, under the golden shadows of the golden arches, officially as well, Little Rock. But him looking really good as well. But whatever aspect of that passing attack, from what you saw from Domofsky to some of those targets, or the everything all together, what were you liking in terms of their ability to complement the rushing attack that we knew was going to be, regardless of who was back for them, where they clearly want to set up their identity? What did you feel about their passing attack with Domofsky and some of those receivers building off of the day that Mambo had in the backfield?
I think there's a lot of potential here. I really think that I like these receivers a lot. Tyreek Quason made a few really good plays, especially even on special teams as well. Kareem Cotton looks really impressive. He looks like an incredible athlete that they just need to get the ball to. And Colby Ginn, we've always known that he's a good receiver, but actually getting a chance to watch him. And once again, we talk about how important it is to get out to a game rather than just seeing a stream where the camera's just following the ball. There was I believe it was their first drive when they really impressively drove the length of the field, had to end up coming away with just 3 points, but we're right at the doorstep in the red zone. And Colby Ginn hits this double move to go as an in across the back of the end zone, and is wide open with, just because of his outstanding route running abilities and the speed that he has. Now, that outstanding defensive line for Laurier, I'm pretty sure, got a sack on that play, so Domofsky couldn't find him. But just watching his route running abilities and watching how he's able to interact with some of the best DBs in the conference, once again with the Laurier Golden Hawks here, was really, really impressive, even if he didn't always get the ball. Domofsky once again showed flashes of what we think could happen here, but to me, it felt like he was just rushing everything. There were times where he ran out of the pocket and he had somebody that was open, and instead of just actually setting his feet and taking that extra second to get a base, he just chucks it, and because it's all armage, he just puts it into the dirt. And there's a couple of times like that where he's trying to rush plays and he's trying to get the ball out as fast as you can. And to his credit, like, if there are open windows in that defensive secondary for Laurier, they close in like a half a second. So if you don't capitalize on that, you don't get a chance to do it. But I think that he just needed to take a little bit more time, settle down a little bit more, and recognize the fact that, okay, if it's not there, let's not forget he does have the ability to take off and run with this as well. I mean, he did it 5 times for 27 yards with a long of 11. So I think that he's got the capabilities to supplement his passing game with a bit of running as well, so he doesn't have to force balls in there. But I would have liked to have seen him just calm down a little bit, settle more into that pocket, or settle more into his throws, and really be more purposeful with that. And I think this is the first game of the season. He was injured last year, coming back from injury, and all of this. So there's a lot of factors into that, playing one of the best defenses in the conference. I think that there's still a lot of potential with this Windsor offense, and especially in the passing game. It's just going to take a little bit more time, and it's a tough beat when you have 3 weeks of training camp and you go up against the best team in the conference, and I don't want to overstate that.
And if there's a reason to feel like a quarterback looks rushed, it could just be as simple as saying that if there's a defense that's going to rush a young quarterback, it's going to be this Laurier defense. And let's flip the script, talk about these Golden Hawks a little bit more. Obviously, we've been talking glowingly about that defensive secondary, as we should. Again, the day that Malik had, Jahari Hastings and Bayfield and all these guys out there. But let's talk about the linebacking core, which we obviously know with Gregorczyk in the middle, and Jesse Wilkins just flying all over the ball, that was a great linebacking core. But I don't know if we really, and I'll leave this up to you because you were aware of this before and brought to my attention, but having the transfer of Josh Connors coming into this program, and we saw him make an impact in the Guelph game, seemingly more so on specials. I didn't really clock him as a major contributor as part of the regular defensive rotation in that first game. Maybe I'm just wrong on that. Maybe I'm misremembering it. What have you. It felt like 44, Josh Connors coming in from, was it St. FX? Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. Coming in from St. FX, really felt like he was a bit more established with that defense in this game than he was in the opening game on the road against Guelph. And just thinking about that linebacking core of Flaherty, Wilkins, Flaherty, Gregorczyk, and now Connors. My gosh, I mean, it's like, could this defense have gotten any better? Well, yeah, apparently they very well may have. And obviously with what we talked about with guys like Tenney on the front end and being short Omari Hastings as well, like this defense is so special. But Tom, can you talk a little bit about Josh Connors and again, what, folks, if they haven't really got a sense of him, what we can expect from this year and what you saw on the field last night or yesterday, or Josh, 2 days ago?
Yeah, I think that Josh Connors is a hell of a linebacker. He was an AUS All-Star when he was out in Santa Fe, and the fact that he belongs in this linebacker room should say everything about the potential and about the talent and the skill that he has. What I've seen is that they have specific packages to bring him out in, and sometimes he's on the field during that, depending on the opponent, depending on what their strength is. So in certain games, you may not see him as much because maybe they like Gregorczyk and they like Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty a little bit more for the package that they see, but he's still on every special team. He's on defense. I did see him a few times. Finished with, I think, 4 total tackles in this game. So doing something in this, but I still think that this is an extremely talented Laurier defense, especially at that linebacker core. So if you're able to get in the game at all in these positions, that should speak to how good you are in the spot. But even just talking about the rest of that team going into this game, I mean, no Omari Hastings and a couple of other key injuries on that Laurier defensive line. And I'm thinking, man, like with a team like Windsor that we've known previously loves to run the football, this could be a long day. But seeing the return of Marcus Tenney, seeing Mateo La Quintana do his thing, Andre Butte on there, like these guys really are some of the top tier in the OUA for a specific reason. And getting in the backfield, disrupting things constantly, and allowing guys like Ethan Gregorczyk and Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty to flow and do their thing was really outstanding. And like we mentioned at the top, that the shout out of the week was that Laurier defensive secondary keeping everything in front of them and coming downhill. Some of the biggest hits that I saw consistently coming from Malik Cote or Jahari Hastings and these guys. And while heartbroken for our guy in Harnour going out with an injury, Owen Getz comes back in there and they don't miss a beat. This team just is flowing so well. This is some of the best football that I've seen, period, not just for Laurier, but out across the board here. And I'm really excited for the potential that this team has.
It's interesting just when you said that piece and thinking about the secondary and just keeping everything in front of them, rallying to the ball. And the thing that'll be interesting to see with this Laurier defense is clearly as a team, and we should talk about the offense a little bit too, though. It's kind of just like the offense did what you expect the offense to do. Do they have better days in them? Clearly they'll have better days. But this is, again, it's like this should be the bar that you're expecting to be able to hit week in, week out. But when we got to talk to Arnaud Desjardins after the Vanier Cup, that was one of the things he highlighted that they were just saying about Laurier is being able to say, like, and again, just this thing that I think great programs do of like just taking what the other team does, it gives you, and just being able to just keep the ball moving, keep it going, right? Don't try to force things. But they were saying, okay, like if Cote wants to play that far off, we're just going to get down the flats and we'll take those 4 or 5 yards or 6 yards. And eventually, if you're going to cheat, then we're going to get you big on it. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not Laurier starts, whether they're just keeping something in sort of the back pocket or whatnot for when they get into those U Sport playoffs, in the presumption that they are so lucky to get there, or even just for a Yates Cup, or if anything is sort of in their mind about stylistically how they were able to have success in the OUA, but also keeping in mind how some of those other dominant programs across youth sports, just thinking about that Vanier Cup, we're able to take advantage of it on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, just quickly, obviously, we talked about the day that Cal Wither had, and just really productive, and just the fact that he's been able to step in for this offense and really not feel like they're missing a beat, getting the ball around. I love, we talk so glowingly all the time about our guy and Coach Todd Stones Galloway. I love the call in end of the half, how, as we highlighted, the should have been, would have been interception by Robert Springer that possibly could have been a house call as well. And then what does he do on the next play? He's like, yeah, we're going right back to Ryan Hughes on, I don't know if it was the exact same play, but I just, there was something about that as well that I thought was like such a great signal to tell to your quarterback, with Springer still covering Hughes and just being able to say, hey, Cal, like, that's all right. Like, whether you made the wrong read or you made a good play, we're going back to it. Because it's that piece on bad outcomes don't necessarily negate good decisions, the same way that good outcomes don't necessarily negate bad decisions. Mm-hmm. So, hey, it was the right call and it's still there. We're going to go back to you. And the confidence to me that gives a young kid or any player at any level of football is awesome to see. I mean, it's Ethan Jordan with a quiet 10 reception, 105-yard day, right? Hughes gets the 2 touchdowns. Laomi, yeah, should have had that other one. Tayshaun, 84 on the ground. Quentin Scott, 30, like just so solid offensively. But I just, again, of all those sort of moments, those small things that stand out, was going right back to Ryan Hughes with Cal throwing it, with Springer in the coverage. I thought that was just such expert coaching from the standpoint of those intangible pieces of like, hey, no, kid, you got it, man. We're going right back to it. No sweat. Put that one on the shelf and execute. And that's what they did, and a huge momentum swing going into the half.
Yeah, and so it was a very similar play, but they had called a couple of those hook routes, and that's what the second one was what Robert Springer jumped on, which is why he almost got that interception. He was reading it properly. I mean, he's one of the best DBs out there for a reason. He's why he was on our top 55. But the immediate play afterwards, like you mentioned, they go to Ryan Hughes, and it's a stutter and go. And so Ryan does that turn like he's about to, and then he takes off on that go route, and Cal finds him, and that's exactly what happens. Springer goes to jump for it again, and it's a touchdown, man. And so, yeah, it's understanding that defense, understanding what they like to do, and especially even in the mindset. We know that Robert Springer is a fantastic DB, and you know that right after he drops one, he's really going to want to make up for that and try to go for another one. So he recognizes it's going to be a curl. He jumps on it, and then away you go, and it's a touchdown from that standpoint.
And as always, the importance of being live, because all I could really discern on that play is it looked like a slant. I just saw him cutting, like knifing to the inside on an angle. But so getting that insight makes me love the call that much more. Laurier is going to be taking their show on the road for a Friday night affair, as we talked about, in Richardson Stadium against the Queens Golden Gales, a game that I'm over the moon on. Windsor is going to be hosting Guelph, a 7 p.m. affair. Tom, my apologies. I know you had some other commentary you wanted to get out on this one.
Yeah, just one last thing that I wanted to talk about. I like this Windsor defensive line specifically. I like those defensive ends. I think they got some pressure onto Cal a little bit, maybe a little bit because of Laurier, those tackles hinging a little bit too fast and everything. But Liam Hoskins, number 22 for them, looks like a really outstanding pass rusher. He's got this rip and dip mastered look where he is going completely underneath these tackles. And you've got Spencer Walsh, and shout out to Delphin Gilly, I believe. I'm sorry, Coach Scott. I know you told me how to say it, but my memory's not there anymore. But he makes his first ever start at that boundary tackle spot after being a converted D lineman, and he looks like he's going to be just an all-star in the making for sure. But against a very tall, big tackles, getting underneath them with that dip and rip move was really outstanding, and Hoskins is one of the best that I've seen doing that. Ahmad Taylor on the other side as well, even Braxton Johnson and Curtis Kendall. This Windsor defensive line looks pretty stout, and they look pretty good, and I'm excited to see what they're going to be doing. Obviously, no Claudia Moosin in that pass game is going to hurt, but I think they're going to be just fine in getting some pressures on quarterbacks.
No, and I'm happy you brought that up, because as well, it reminded me to give the shout out to Marco Piccioni, in the middle, first game starting at middle linebacker for them from Guelph, Ontario. And we had so many question marks, thinking about, Maceo Christmas being out of the program, just Jason Rashotzi not being there. As I was mentioning, Trey Ranson being a linebacker who was a first-year kid last year, I think, not there. Piccioni, apologies if I'm messing up on the pronunciation, looked really strong there in the middle. To no surprise, Coach Donovan found a guy to be able to patrol and control the middle, and of course Ethan John in the mix as well. They're going to have really solid defense. Again, they're hosting the Guelph Griffins. Yeah, still my Guelph Griffins. It's okay. We're just a little less excited today. It's all right. It's all right. Still my Guelph Griffins. We'll see if we save the whole song and dance when we get there. Under the lights, Alumni Stadium, under the golden arches of under the shadows of the golden arches and the 401, all that good stuff. Tom might be in the house for that one. I don't want to rate it any promises that he has to cash, but let's go to the other night game that I was in the house for, the overtime thriller. It seems like this is a trend that we're getting these OT games week after week, and if that trend continues, I am very much going to be a happy camper. But it was the Waterloo Warriors coming into Varsity Stadium and picking up the win. Final score, Waterloo 26, Toronto 23. First and foremost, I mean, as far as the shout outs of folks to see, great seeing the Oceans. Met Mama and Papa Ocene last year, saw them again out there. Great to see them. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to the Stewarts, Mama and Papa Stewart of, I guess out in King, Ontario, of, Ryan's family out there. Shout out to y'all. Just shout out to everyone out there, seeing the Waterloo folks. As always, they travel super well. And shout out to the UofT folks for getting us the credentials to be on the field. If you haven't gone and seen the photos Dakota was able to take, I don't know if it's on Instagram or on his own website where you can get them. He took some amazing shots. You're all welcome on behalf of Dakota because he is excellent at what he does on that. And Tom, the first thing I want to address with this game was how much I loved, and I didn't get to see K-Mac after the game, his approach in trying to respond to what UofT put on tape against Carleton last week, which was to literally be like, we are going to play as light a box as we possibly can. At times, I swear there was maybe 4 guys in the entire box. And to UofT's credit, I'll say to their credit, because they still were able to move the ball effectively in the first half, is saying, well, we know that we are still at our best getting the ball out to our guys, the crossing routes, getting them in space. I mean, Ocene had some bad drops in the game, but had some really solid production, including that near game-winning touchdown right at the end. But I loved K-Mac's response to what was expected from UofT in this week and being able to say, I dare you to run the ball. And UofT's response to that was one that I don't love, which was saying, yes, we're still going to pass the ball. And at times, Barnett's just going to be able to call his own number. Because in terms of his passing day, he goes 23 for 36, 253 and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Solid day. Again, very reflective of what a lot of these other quarterbacks are doing and much more representative of probably what we can expect from Barnett week in, week out. I'll let you talk about UofT fans that were maybe getting at us. But what I don't love, I know this sounds strange, what I don't love is also seeing him leading the rushing, not just in yardage, but with 14 attempts for 82 yards. You get the touchdown. It's great. But he was hurt last year, very much taking off and getting a bad hit. And he's a big dude. But there's certain things, call me crazy, there's certain things that old Zach doesn't like in terms of how you handle quarterbacks. I don't like when you rotate them series by series, drive by drive, quarter by quarter. And I don't like it when they're taking unnecessary hits. I understand the concept of saying, look, if they're going to really lighten up the box and then you literally have just all the space in the world to just get downhill. I get it. It has to be refined a little bit because I'm just so worried about a guy we already saw banged up last year. If that's going to be a response, because I think, again, Carleton should have been able to respond to that in a similar vein earlier instead of playing cover 0 against these guys. But for a guy in K-Mac who's one of the more aggressive defensive coordinators that we know is out there to be able to say, okay, fine, I'm willing to take away the thing that I want to do best, knowing that I'm going to try to slow down the thing I know you want to do best. I love that out of K-Mac. It worked at times. The second half, really effective in slowing them down. And though I understand what I assume was UofT's thought process in saying, let's let Barnett run it when it does open up like the Red Sea in the middle, I don't love those hits that he takes in the process of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, having a guy that's obviously showcased outstanding ability like Scott Barnett, you want to limit those hits as best as possible here. And he still has a really good game. I mean, he finishes, like you said, with 82 on the ground and another touchdown. If not for the end of the loss that UofT happened, he's probably going to be our back-to-back player of the week on the offensive side. But got to give it to a guy who actually won the game and all that fun stuff. So seeing this and seeing Jake Ocene and Chris Joseph and what they're able to do. I mean, Ocene finishes with 13 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if not for a couple of key drops in that second half, maybe another guy that we're looking at for an offensive player of the game. But Chris Joseph, 8 catches for 78 yards. I think the thing that we can say is that this UofT offense and the potential that it has is real. It's legit. It's not quite 600 yards of passing offense, but it's legit. And I think that teams definitely have to game plan for this. And like you said, I loved what Coach K-Mac did in this one. And the other thing is too, maybe there's only 4 defenders in the box, but it's Michael Omaseni as the other guy that's in the box there, and he's going to make some tackles. He's going to do some good things. So having that as an answer, as a response to what U of T was doing, I think was a great call. Now, obviously, Oseen, Chris Joseph, Scott Barnett were still able to do their thing, still able to get things done productively here, but certainly limiting what they wanted to do. And in the second half, completely shutting the door on them until the very last like Hail Mary type that they got to get into the end zone with the dying seconds here. That offense really didn't do anything in the third quarter and for the most of the fourth quarter. And a big shout out to that Waterloo defense for limiting them and what they wanted to do.
And obviously, as you mentioned, Omaseni, it starts with him in the middle. And yeah, if he's the one waiting for that QB scramble spying, then you got to be happy defensively. On that defensive line, I mean, again, guys like Marcus Miller having a really strong day with the sack he gets in on the day in those more one-on-one situations, or having to take on double teams. I thought they did a really effective job of, when you're outnumbered because you're not bringing all that pressure, of still trying to, be able to make Barnett a little uncomfortable in the middle there. Obviously, we like what Keyshawn Bowen shows as well coming off the edge. Tom, like with this game, and there's so much more we need to get into. We need to like formally go through the end of it, and the what I thought was a mistake turned out it was a decision, but the decision was a mistake. So I guess I was still right in how U of T decided to handle their kickoff following that touchdown, which I just we'll get there. We'll get into the overtime session, but I mean, it all ties back into it where like. If I were to tell you, Tom, because going into this game, honestly, I know this is going to sound like a cop-out or whatever, but like there was part of me of being like, I think that Waterloo can come in and beat U of T? Yeah, absolutely. I think that they could do that. But if I had told you, and obviously we all picked U of T, and hey, we wore the shame of that. Hey, we got it wrong. Shout out to Waterloo. Like if there's anything we make apparent, we love Waterloo football. I know I'm wearing the arch nemesis gear right now, but put that aside. But if I had told you, in addition to us picking U of T to begin with, I said also, by the way, Tom, Nick Orr is going to go out late in the first half, and it's going to be Nolan Cabanon, who, again, a guy in Nolan Cabanon, we've seen him perform well with this team. And I say to Dakota, I'm like, okay, we got Nolan the Cowboy Cabanon, the gunslingers ready to let it rip. And then, but no Quentin Springer either running the ball. Mm-hmm. Like if I had just added that in alone, I wouldn't have thought twice in picking U of T in this game. And just as a way of just, with Coach Conway, with Coach Bertoya, Coach McNeil, and just everyone part of that Waterloo team, just what a special win. Such a special win because of the nature of how it broke down, but especially just having your back against the wall with the key, I don't know if it was an injury to Quentin Springer coming into it that kept him out. I'm assuming so because we saw him against Ottawa week 1. And obviously they didn't know that Nick Orr was going to get hurt. And it kind of looked like the same situation we saw at Guelph that we'll get to later, where I didn't look like a devastating injury for Nick Orr. But when you do have a backup quarterback in Caban who, much like with McRae and Aboud, where it's like, okay, our starter at 75%, we might actually take our backup. Not every team can say that. A lot of teams have to put their backup back in. So aside from the fact that Caban picks up the reins and goes 13 for 18 for 194, just those aspects alone, just so impressed by Waterloo, the never die attitude throughout the game, and such a special moment beyond all that. But I mean, Tom, the end of this game is where it truly became just such a memorable moment and one of the just games of what will likely be the season. I don't know if you want to kind of take us beat by beat through the waning moments. As you said, U of T struggling to move the ball. They're down some. Take us through the ending of this game, Tom, because I mean, what an electric finish that was.
Yeah, and I mean, just before we get into that, watching what this U of T offense did in the first half and how well they were able to move the ball and how sharp they looked, I was completely confident in the picks that we had made here. Like, this was a really strong looking team. So once again, shout out to K-Mac and shout out to that defense for really locking it down. But in the dying seconds here, U of T gets to their own 40-yard line, 50-yard line, something along those lines. And we get a bomb that's thrown by Scott Barnett to, I believe it was Jake Oseen. Yeah. And he catches in the end zone to make the score 20-16 with 9 seconds left. An electric finish. And my goodness, it was so incredible to see that. The crowd, and I'll let you talk about this as well after I'm done, but like I'm sure the crowd that was in the attendance for that blew up, and seeing U of T packed with fans is always one of the best atmospheres. And then because of the celebration, I believe, they get a penalty that's implied on the kickoff, so you get bumped back from the 45 to the 35. And then you have the strangest thing, and we thought it was a mistake. Some people think that it was a call that was made. Regardless, 9 seconds left, you purposefully kick the ball out of bounds on the ensuing kickoff, which is an automatic flag. And because of the penalty, actually gives Toronto the ball, or sorry, Waterloo the ball on the 55. And then a few plays later, they actually get Evan to kick that 57-yard field goal. But it's 9 seconds, folks. If you boot that ball as far back as you possibly can here, you drain clock, you start them off at best, maybe the 20-yard line, the 30, even if it's the 40. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever why you would do that. And then Waterloo kicks the field goal. They send it into overtime, and you have one of the worst series that you could possibly have in some of the most important moments. The snap goes right through Scott Barnett's hands on the first overtime play. He has to go back and just throw the ball away. On the second one, he throws the ball, and I don't want to name the receiver because I could just tell that he was just so heartbroken. But Scott Barnett throws it to a wide open receiver who just outright drops it. And then the next play, they have to, on third down, ultimately have to go for the field goal, and it's wide left. Waterloo returns it, and then they have a few plays to kick a field goal, and the game is over. And you just think, like, you did such an amazing job to get into that spot to potentially win the game, to get that touchdown, and then that kickoff and the ensuing parts afterwards, it just scratches your brain. What the hell happened?
Yeah, I didn't, and it's funny, I didn't actually realize they threw the penalty because what deservedly drew the penalty was, me and Dakota are by the south end zone where Jake Osteen, reels in that touchdown, incredible moment. And, we are vastly past the 35-yard line that the team is supposed to be held within, between the 35s on their sideline. And I am just, greeted by a stampede as I see the whole U of T bench, and I get it, the excitement of the moment. I see Zero Ilya Linney running towards me. I'm like, holy smokes, this is where I die. This is where my life ends, because this guy is gonna take my head off just out of the pure excitement of the moment and everything like that. So being caught up in that, I didn't even actually realize that they had got the penalty, though clearly deservingly so, which stinks. You hate when that happens. And yeah, I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand in any capacity. And we're going to talk about the Guelph game very soon and similar moments that just drove us bonkers. And at the end of the day, like all credit in the world goes to Evan Astolfo for hitting that kick. And you could see the referees actually got together afterwards too, where there was some conversation of being like, we're sure that went in, right? Like, because didn't go back to watch the replay of it. We were kind of on the opposite side of the field seeing it. It was signaled right away in, but you saw they still wanted to confer on it and everything like that. At the end of the day, I mean, him hitting that is still the story of the game. And I'm going to add this in if we are correct, and the individual we talked to knows a bit about specials who believe that it was an intentional play by them to kick it out of bounds. Like, I'm not going to say that that's why he ends up pushing that kick or pulling that kick wide left, but I'm going to add this into my rules about things you do or don't do with football players. Don't have your quarterbacks taking unnecessary hits. Don't substitute them on and off the field, and don't F around with your kicker. Because I can only imagine what's going through his head when he kicks this ball out of bounds, whether he was told to do it or it just happened anyways. He then sees this first-year kid on the other side. And we're talking about Sam Hankey for U of T, a really strong kicker, to state the least. Then seeing Astolfo have this incredible moment, and then he goes back up, being able to have the opportunity to, I think it was the first overtime session, so set the tone. So Waterloo has to at least match with the field goal. Don't mess around with your kickers. Don't, hey, Horvat wants to kick a 40-yard field goal on that first drive at York Mac. You let him kick it. Let your kickers be kickers. They're athletes. They're kind of weird, but you gotta let them do their thing. Don't mess around with kickers. Don't sub your quarterbacks on and off, and don't let them take hits. Those are Coach Zacky's 3 rules of football. Yeah, I mean, it's the highs and lows, and you alluded to the crowd there. Somewhat it was a great crowd. It was very much centered within the, sort of middle couple sections. They clearly didn't sell tickets to like the outer sections, which was a bit frustrating because a friend of mine I coach with tried to get tickets and it said it was sold out. And it's just like, why? Clearly it wasn't sold out. And if it was sold out, where the heck were the thousands of people that would have been fit into those sections? So that was a bit of a bummer, but man, like a good U of T crowd, like they knew the moments to cheer for. And again, a lot of Waterloo folks in there. And of course, shout out to Marianne Vaughn, because she was there. I forgot to even tell you this, Tom. She sends her love. She sends her hellos, everything like that. The glue that keeps Waterloo football all together. Just a beautiful moment under the lights, Varsity Stadium. Such a great evening. The weather was perfect. The lights, the pageantry of it all. Just such a great OUA moment to be around. Tom, final commentary about this game, one side or the other. Just the game itself is just one that I think we're going to be talking about when we get to the end of the season, of just the great moments from this year.
Yeah, and it's very easy to look at this and say, oh, U of T, what happened here or whatever else. But I really want to make sure that we're shouting out Waterloo. And I think we did a good job of that. But Roy Vanderveen, he finishes with 10 attempts or only 47 yards, but the way that he was running and going downhill and daring somebody to try to come and tackle him was an outstanding. It was just so great to see that, and kind of complimenting Anthony Miller, who has that speed and the ability to get around people. So having that as a 1-2 punch, and especially when Quentin Springer comes back, could be a very exciting run game from that standpoint as well. And also, every once in a while, you like to give yourself a little pat on the back kind of thing. When you talked about with me previously about if there's a guy that needs to be kind of that outlet pass or that ultimate safety net, I said Evan Basiliga. He finishes with 7 catches for 92 yards. I mean, it's almost like I know what I'm talking about here, but he's a guy who I'd love to see getting back into that Waterloo offense in that passing game. There's a lot of potential that's here. And Nolan Caban coming off the bench, and we've seen him do his thing before previously, but it really can't be outstated about the great job that he did in engineering this Waterloo comeback. If you want to say that, whatever, but this Waterloo win ultimately when Nick Orr goes out with that injury was just really fantastic to see. And I wanted to make sure that we shouted out this Waterloo squad, because they did look really impressive. That offense finally starting to see some signs of life and how they're going about things. So just shout out Waterloo, shout out Coach Burt, K-Mac, Marianne Vaughn, and obviously my guy in Conway. This is an outstanding W for that team.
Yeah, I love the Evan Basiliga shout out, and he's another name that didn't come up in our discussion yesterday or Saturday, whenever it was, of like, the Nathan Dankers, Mateo Tuioti, Evan Basiliga. Again, some teams call these guys H-backs, some call them tight ends, one way or the other. And that safety blanket piece is great because it's a huge target to throw at with secure hands. So loving to see, and we've seen so many teams using tight end packages this year already, which I love seeing. I mean, you were joking yesterday that we were playing in the wrong era of OUA football. I had no qualms with the era we were playing in, but one way or the other, yeah, shout out to Waterloo. Love seeing them pick up that win. And again, a good effort by U of T on the day. Waterloo heading back home to take on the Carleton Ravens, coming off the week 2 bye. U of T, as we've already set up, is heading into the Red Blue Bowl battle, Toronto Argo Cup, Matt Dean's Bowl. Tom takes us to our last game, the Sunday nighter from London, Ontario. And, you gave that shout out just real quickly to Roy Vanderveen and described the way he was running. And Dakota was quick to say, what year is this kid in? Because he runs like a first year. He runs like a guy who's just, he needs to prove himself, right? Second year kid, first year really getting touches. But I'm going to hold on to that comment you made about the way he ran. Like he needed every dang inch, yard, centimeter blade of grass on the artificial turf every time the ball was in his hands. Because we're talking about the Sunday night affair from London. Final score, the Western Mustangs 53. My Guelph Griffins 33. We're going to stick it with that for right now, okay? Because I'm a little disappointed. I'm a little upset. And we knew coming into the season that this was the August of hell for Guelph. And September doesn't get that much easier. As we've already highlighted, they're going on the road to Windsor, which is never a good place to have to travel to. The travel alone, and just weird things happen year in, year out when you're under the shadow of the Golden Arches. And they still have Ottawa on the schedule. They still have Queens on the schedule. We knew this was going to be tough. And we came out of that Laurier game saying, hey, you know what? You get it going a little earlier, but clearly you proved that you can play with this team. You almost pulled off the miraculous comeback at the end, walked out of that game being like, would have felt so good to get that win, but you knew you could play with them. But you showed last year you could play with them. And you showed last year you could play with Western as well in a playoff game in London as well at Western Alumni Stadium. And you come out in this game and we always talk about it. You can't give Western anything. You have to take advantage of every opportunity that they're giving you, and you cannot give them opportunities to stick around in a game, especially when early on, Western is not moving that ball a darn bit, multiple 2-and-outs to start it. Guelph's driving the ball, and they're settling for a field goal, another field goal that then is doinks off the goalpost, and just leaving way too much time to say Western's going to figure it out. And they're going to figure it out sticking to their game plan. Because at the very least, if you're putting the pressure on them and saying that you're putting them in a position to come from behind, we know, and Western knows this. I mean, no team, to state the obvious, no team likes playing from behind. There's certain teams that are built a little bit better to do it. And we do know that, frankly, for all the things that Western is arguably the best at, and partly because maybe they're so good at all these things, they just don't get the reps of playing from behind and they're not built to do so. You got to take advantage early when you do have those opportunities. And they had those opportunities in spades and they didn't capitalize. And you add on these silly penalties that Guelph seems to be just making a habit of early on, going back to that that Laurier game. It shows only 6 on the day for 53 penalty yardages. And if that's true, clearly you can live with that. But just the fact that there are these offside penalties on your defense or a receiver going, the things that are so within your control, and a couple plays where a ball carrier, a receiver, whomever it is maybe going into contact or has an opportunity to make an explosive play and just feel like they're letting up on the gas. I don't know what it is. Guelph has clearly all the talent on the field. The coaching staff is all there. I don't know how to describe it, and I'm not saying the sky is falling, but there was part of me that just felt like, I don't know. They just weren't ready for the moment of being able to say, when you're in Western's house and you have these opportunities, obviously easier said than done, but man, oh man, was it frustrating just seeing that lack of clutch execution in those moments when you need to against this team. And I still come out of this game saying, you can go into London and play with that team. You can go into Laurier and play with that team. But it's that difference that we highlighted from the preseason tiers of teams who have proven it and a team in Guelph that still needs to prove it. And the talent's all still there, so I'm not saying the sky is falling, but man, was that a big letdown.
Yeah, and I think that there's an important distinction that I want to make sure that we talk about here, because for people who just kind of listen to the podcast, you might hear us be a little bit more, not necessarily coddling, but a little bit more understanding around certain teams and when they lose, or, the way that we talked about Mac, or the way that we talked about, some other teams, and just like, hey, like, it is what it is, not your whatever. When you listen to the way that we talked about Queens last week and how we talked about Guelph this week, this is no longer hey, this is whatever. You're there. You have the pieces in front of you. We know, we've seen it. You have one of the best offensive lines in the country here. If Tristan Aboud is fully healthy, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the conference as well. That defense should be outstanding. Maybe the receivers have something, whatever, but Willem Arsenault, Jared Tessier, those guys, we know that they have the capabilities of it. There's no more coddling here. This is a time where, Guelph, it's time to step up. You had a transition period last year, and that was where expectations were low. You finished 6-2 and went to the semifinals. You showcase, okay, you're real. You're for real now. You're a legit team. This performance was not indicative of what the capabilities that you have, and we're pissed because of it, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, this is allowing Western to put up 53 points on you, and at times doing it at will. Western has the ball and it's a handoff to Jack Kelly, and Jack Kelly's a hell of a ball player, but he takes it 62 yards to the house, and there's one guy from Guelph who's chasing him down. Shout out to Pope, who didn't give up on the play at all and went to try and strip the ball right at the 1-yard line. But like, this is not good enough. This is just purely not good enough. If you want to play in this ballpark, if you want to be fighting for Yates Cups, it goes through Western. regardless of what you think, historically speaking, ever since G Marsh, it goes through Western. And if you're not ready to play with them, you're not ready to win Yates Cups. And it's frustrating as hell because you should be.
And you go through the box score and you say, hey, look, you tied them through the first quarter. You tied them in the third quarter. You had a point up of them on the fourth quarter. But to get outscored by 21 points in that second quarter is just, to state the least, it's obviously, it's untenable to think that you can manage that. And the block punt by Maseri that then led to, I forget which touchdown it was in the second quarter. And then the kickoff that goes out of bounds where, and again, it's hard to know what decisions are made, but when we saw them later on too on some of the Guelph punts where they're clearly not wanting to set, and we know Campanero, and I don't know if it was Dasani McIntosh also returning for them. I forget who they had back there. We know Western has some good returners, but this isn't the same. Like, there's no offense at those guys. Like, I understand just from everything Tayshaun Jackson has shown consistently, I get it. You don't want to kick to him, and maybe you're even going to risk giving them the ball on the 40 if it's going to go out of bounds on that opening kickoff. But there's a certain point where, I mean, we weren't terribly stoked with what we saw from the special teams effort from them last week, but in large part, we thought it was more so of being like, hey, those cover units by Laurier are absolutely tremendous. But it's starting to feel like a bit of a trend of saying this is a bit of maybe a weak spot for them, especially against these teams at the top where we know that when you are in that proven tier, when you're winning Yates Cups, it's because you can do it so effectively at all three levels. So, okay, maybe you concede a little bit on that special teams fine. That's fine. Okay, because we came into this game saying, you know what? Looking at Western defensively, what we're liking from Guelph, yeah, you're still banged up in the running back core, but with this O-line, with Tristan Aboud, with these receivers, hopefully getting a little bit of that juice in them after last week and knowing that some of the alumni weren't terribly excited about what that receiving core and Guelph consistently being this team that has top talent at receiver. It's just, yeah, disappointing to say the least. And those expectations are what warrant this type of reaction. And I'm not saying that the sky is falling, except then you also come out of this game and I'm thinking, I don't know who they have a bloody quarterback going in next week because we see Aboud leave, we see McRae go in. We were talking to some of the Western guys afterwards and the production McRae was able to get in large part with his feet. I mean, just on the rushing end alone, McRae ends up 16 carries for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, that's great. From the Western perspective, they're like, yeah, we really only prep for him in goal line situations and short yardage situations. So there's that aspect to it as well. And that he's just doesn't have the same touch that Aboud can have on those passes. So the offense became so one-dimensional, even though by the numbers, they were starting to, well, they moved the ball okay with Aboud. It's just that the ability to finish that was missing, a few of these key plays on specials, and whether it was a product of Western just leaning on him that then leads to that Jack Kelly big breakout run, the Ethan Dolby big breakout run. Every major play went Western's way. You know, and it's just like, I'm not saying that as any way of being like, I know I kind of joked about that in the Laurier game last week, being like, man, there's going to be some calls that go one way or the other, and they felt like they all went the Laurier way. Like, that's still a bit of a bad take by me. Like, though that does work out in the aggregate over a season. But every splash play was in Western's favor. And at a certain point, I'm just waiting to see who's your guy on offense, who's going to be that guy who, when you're down and out, you can say, hey, we need this play right now. We need a moment right now because we're missing the juice. We're missing that like oomph for our backs against the wall. We need that guy who's going to respond. Defensively, they haven't had I don't know if they've even had a turnover yet in 2 games of action. And like, you know, who's that guy on the defense? Is it really the fact that Mortuzo left this defense and they just lose that key player? It could be. We know he has that talent. And specials, we've yet to see that, like, who that guy is, or that just reliable thing that they know. It's like they are so consistent. That defense should be good to great. We know that offense at its best can be great. But beyond the lack of finishing, and I'm also just concerned about that piece on who is that guy who's just going to make those plays when you really need that moment. Because right now through 2 games, I haven't seen it. And you can say, well, it's just 2 games and pump the brakes. But we knew there was a very likely outcome that Guelph was starting the season 0-2 with the schedule they had in front of them. It's just, there's a few of these things in a small sample size sport what football is. It just raises concern of being able to say, like, I know they can still play in these games, but it's those other things, being that much cleaner on your specials, that much cleaner in not picking up these penalties that are within your control, and knowing who those dudes are to make those big plays that are going to be the difference between you just being able to come out of a game like this and say, hey, you know what? We'll clean it up. We'll get back on pace. We'll go on to the next one. We'll get back on track, and being able to say, no, we took care of business and we picked up a big win on the road. I know we need to talk about Western, obviously them winning it. They did great things in this game. We'll go into all those things, but gosh, darn it, that was a frustrating one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why you're not wearing your Yates Cup ring right now for that, for the
Oh,
exactly
was I
that
not?
reason.
Oh,
Hey?
shoot. I didn't even realize that. I was crazy. I didn't, sorry. I thought my hand felt a little lighter right now. Sorry.
But yeah, there's a lot of things that were frustrating on the Guelph side of things for sure, but I don't want that to overstate how impressive this Western team looks. And it can be very tiring to talk about, oh yeah, Western team looks good. Of course, they always look freaking good, but Evan is getting back to form. And what we were told to by a couple of those Western receivers in that Queens game, where it seemed like they weren't on the same page, it was the receivers that were at fault, not Evan. And despite that fact, and despite that everybody seems to go after Evan, he just takes all the brunt of it, doesn't care, just shoulders it, keeps going, and just keeps winning football games, because that's just what that man does. To see, we knew about Ethan Dolby in the run game, but Jack Kelly looks to be the next great Western running back here. I believe he's just in his second year. I don't think that these stats are fully accurate, because it only shows him with 4 attempts. I thought he had more than that, but 4 attempts on the ground, 121 yards and a touchdown, including that 62-yard rip that we talked about. I mean, Ethan Dolby with an 84-yard touchdown run himself. He finishes with 2 on the day as well. Jerome Rancourt with 5 carries for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. There's a reason why we gave this Western offensive line a shout out, because they were really doing their thing and moving the ball. Seth Robertson was one of the best receivers consistently in the conference. And I think that we just kind of talk about it like that's common knowledge, but I need to say that out loud. His one catch where he was not open, the DB that was on him, I can't remember who it was, had great coverage, and he somehow snagged it out of the air, took off and ran with it, and just went in for a touchdown, was incredible. That 43-yard long that he shows there, 4 catches for 96 and a touchdown. Braden Masseri, I said this to him, and I think it's worthwhile for me to say here. He's one of my favorite players to watch. He was one of the returners in the punt game and in the kickoff return game, and he does that great. He had the punt block, he had the corner route. There was a few times where he was open on those corner routes as well. So he's got great route running abilities. He's deceptively fast, and man, you don't want to let him score, because when he scores, he's going to let you know about it too. But this is just such an overpowered Western offense, as we typically see here. But with Jack Kelly and Ethan Dolby leading the way on the ground, and it's making you respect the run game with that great offensive line in front, and then Evan slinging it like we know he can and getting it to his guys in space, and the route running capabilities and everything else here, like it's so easy to just take the advantage, or just not appreciate the greatness that we were seeing. But that's exactly what this was. This was greatness by Western.
You're totally right. And honestly, I know there's obviously all the things on the offensive side to want to highlight. And I mean, frankly, what's catching my eye too, just, talking about obviously what Jack Kelly was able to do. We know what Dolby's able to do. Seeing Nawaz Oyewale only with the 2 carries on that, but just from my time in London, a star running back, I think out of Banting. I hate to get that wrong, but just being like, oh man, this guy's waiting in the wings too. My goodness. But honestly, the thing that I thought was really indicative was, number one, how good a job Western did defensively in slowing down the Guelph rushing attack. Because you take away, I mean, maybe this is a silly exercise to do. You sort of take away those 130 yards of McRae, because obviously that was, I don't want to say found money, but from the aspect that you didn't plan for that from the Guelph side of things, and Western wasn't prepared for that. I mean, it's just the nature of how the game works. And clearly, if it were still a Bood, he's like, Guelph's still going to get rushing yards. So it's not to say that like if McRae doesn't go in, you lose 130 yards outright of rushing. But Guelph ends up with 271 yards, probably closer to the 200 side of things, taking into account what you were able to get out of Marshall, somewhat of that, in a moment you didn't anticipate going into the game, and with them not being prepared for it. And why I say all that is that it just felt like And obviously, we know Von Muhldorfer in the middle. And man, he had such a game. Like he was so gassed coming out of it. He had the protein shake and all the vitamins, the multivitamins going after the game right away. You know, our guys in his nutrition bag on the sideline just trying to refuel. You know, he left it all on the field. The big man's got to, load back up. Loved seeing that after the game. Guy takes care of the body. I love it 5-5. But how effectively they were able to slow down the Guelph rushing attack. I mean, I know Isaiah Smith ends up 88 yards, 12 carries, the one touchdown. So the yardage average looks okay, but just times where it felt like for a team in Guelph who we know has such a great offensive line, and at times where Western's coming out with a 30 front, where it's like, yeah, that's great. You're getting a 5-yard carry, but this needs to break for a little bit more based on how they're playing it. And my read on that, without going back to watch it, because I mean, just in real time, me and Tom, are recording here on Labor Day Monday in the late morning. I got home to Toronto at about 2:30 in the morning because we were chopping it up with all the folks in London afterwards. So haven't got a chance to rewatch this game, but it just felt like Western was saying, we're gonna try and slow down this run. We know Aboud's great, obviously, but trusting our guys in the back end, because we know they have strong guys in the back end to be able to say, we don't necessarily think maybe these receivers are good enough to hang with us. So let's commit to slowing down the run, because if Guelph can run the ball and let Aboud cook, now you're in a bad situation. Let's maybe trust that our back end guys can cover these receivers up. Maybe you get a similar situation where Aboud's just sitting back, they're waiting, or we're slowing down the run. It felt like that was what Western was trying to do defensively, and frankly, it worked. And Aboud moved the ball early on, but I don't know. I don't know what to say, man. Again, I want to give all the flowers to Western on this day with what they were doing, and talking about defense. I mean, Elliot Blake as an interesting story that we were able to learn about. That I'll hand over to you, because I mean, I'm all out of sorts at this point. I know I'm gonna listen back to this whenever this pod goes up and be like, I wasn't even making a lick of sense. But let me at least pause for a second to collect myself. Tom, let me hand it off to you here.
Well, just to give the folks some more context just about things in general, afterwards, because we love to be able to connect with guys after the game and everything else, we make the trip down to London, which is obviously a bit of a far rip for us. And then we stayed so long talking to all of our buddies and everybody that we know there that the actual lights in the stadium went off. And we were just having a conversation with our guy and Coach Chris Marshall under the emergency lights outside of the building talking about stuff. So we're a little gassed filming this in the morning so that we can get this pod out to you folks as quick as we possibly can here. But one of the things that I loved the most, we were talking about this, and we mentioned to some of the coaches and just saying, listen, we want to give you guys all your flowers for Western, because in my opinion, I've said it before, the mark of a truly great coach or coaching staff is the ability to make adjustments at halftime. And there is arguably no team that does that better than Western, because of the things that they've seen, the incredible capabilities that they have. And once again, shouting out one of the best to do it in Coach Gleason. Last week against Queens does a lot of really great stuff, especially in that first half, and they're able to do a lot of stuff. Elliot Blake for them was listed as like the second string Sam linebacker. And Coach Gleason, seeing everything that Queens is doing, talking with his coaches, says, you know what? I think Elliot Blake and his skill set, I want him to play and start at will, when he's never done that before. But in the capabilities of what Elliot Blake is able to do and moving around certain pieces in order to find those great matchups, now you're looking around and you're saying, hey, Elliot Blake in Guelph, he finished with 12 total tackles because he was all over the field in a defensive back setting, coming up in the run game as well. And just having that capability and having that knowledge base to say, I've got great athletes all over the field. I mean, we saw it with Richard Adu before, lining up a field corner at half, at boundary corner, depending on where the biggest need was. And at a certain point, at least to start the game, he was locked up with Willem Arsenault, and I think Arsenault finished with one catch, and that was only when the Dubois was off of him. And it was just, hey, you've got a great receiver who we need a lockdown on? Yeah, we got somebody for that. You've got a pretty good capability to do something on the weak side when you're drawing everybody on the strong side? Yeah, let me switch some players around so I can get that for you. What's that? We need to take Von Muhldorfer off because he's been on the field for a long time. No worries. Angelo Longa is going to go out there, make a couple of key plays, including a sack in there from the interior line against one of the best offensive lines in the country. this is just a team that has bodies that are ready to step up and play regardless of what's happening. And why it's so frustrating and why we've been frustrated, and certainly yourself in this one, my man, is because you can see it directly across the field of what a team looks like when you need somebody to step up. And time after time after time in big play scenarios, that's exactly what Western does. They find guys, they call on certain names, and they just get it done. That's exactly what happened here.
And just I think what makes it like so like this, I feel like my feeling is like one of despondence, which is both a combination of like feeling like they left a lot to be wanted on the field, and then adding in the fact that both Aboud and McRae pick up injuries. We already know they're missing Donovan Malloy. They're missing Caleb Sargent. Alex Gordon's dealing with cramps all game long, but Mitch Schretchinger.
Oh,
Oh no, man. Like because we already had a sense that, hey, that first five is as good as you get. But and then part of the reason why we're really bullish right now on them capitalizing on what they have this year is because of how many of those O linemen are probably gone after this year. And you can say that about all sorts of teams where it's like you have that veteran group at a certain spot, and we're obviously biased as O linemen. But when you have a group of guys that have played together for that many years, Ethan Pyle in the middle, Hocevar, Barakis, Schretchinger, Gordon, all these guys, to lose one of them beyond just like whether that how they can recover in that space. We don't know the nature of the injury. It's just that thought and why it gets that much more frustrating of saying, not to say that after this year, this is their only window. Certainly don't believe that at all, because just love just with Coach Soria, the culture and everything he's doing there. Like the program is in good shape, but this window felt that much more special, and in large part because of that O-line. I don't remember seeing him after the game. I know we saw Barakis quickly afterwards or whatnot. But he certainly was very tender getting off the field and being helped, a lower body injury of some kind. And a guy that, you were so high on, of saying that like Oliwe All-Star, possibly all Canadian type quality they had there at, was it right guard, left guard? I forget where they had him.
Left guard.
But yeah, Guelph and left guards. They just put out top talent there year after year. That's what's so much. That's where it's like it's tough what we saw, and then having to accept too that going into next week with Windsor, I'm like, I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue who's on this roster, who's on the depth chart. They were already banged up, and just a story that we've seen going back to the previous administration of this team, just injuries, just key injuries, which is just, that's football. Like, I'm not going to hold that against the other team for Western, in this case, picking up the win. It's just, that's the part that's that much more frustrating, especially when it felt like everything was in line for this year, that you could make the run. And they certainly still can. Again, don't get me wrong. This passion comes out of the frustration of feeling like they haven't lived up to that expectation. I get it that they've been injured. They're missing some guys. They had to go up against the two teams that have only won Yates Cups this decade. Like, again, I understand that. And had we won in these two games, it doesn't guarantee anything about the playoffs, much like losing to them doesn't guarantee anything about the playoffs. It's just that this one stung that much more for some of those effort moments. And then the injuries to boot. It's like you're adding the insult to injury is the injury on top of the insult in a weird way with this one. So that one's so tough, not knowing about some of those key players going into next week.
Yeah, and having so many guys who are clearly dealing with injuries even before going into this game. I mean, we still haven't seen Demetrius Masuka come out for this squad, and there's a number of guys in that defensive secondary I think are dealing with injuries. And then to see this happen again, like the amount of injuries that Guelph has dealt with in the past 5 years is astronomical. It's so many key players and key avenues. I mean, what we've been told, two of the best running backs in the conference are both injured as well in those boots, and Caleb Sargent and Donovan Malloy here as well. And there's so much of that potential, but it's getting to the point of it's like, oh, what a shoulda, coulda kind of territory here, where if you can't put everything together here, there's other teams that are doing it. They're actively doing it. So I don't know. It's heartbreaking to see some of these young men going through this. I mean, Tristan Aboud goes down. You give the Marshall McRae the chance to really showcase his stuff, and man, he's up there with Tayshawn Jackson just in the ability to cut on a dime and have his complete momentum going one way to the other. It was giving fits for that Western defense, especially like we mentioned, not having prep for it. But seeing guys like Mitch Schreckjinger go down and it's heartbreaking. Regardless of which team, regardless of who this is, we always never want to see an injury at all. We want everybody to be playing at their very best because it's great for the game and it's great for everybody else. So to see those injuries and to see Guelph having to go through that, it stinks. But it's the nature of the beast. Everybody deals with it and you move on from it. So you have to just find a way to win.
Absolutely. And there's a certain point where, you might just resign to recognize, okay, look, like blowing these two, I don't say blowing, but losing these two first games. Queens starts off the season 2-0, or pardon me, 1-1, but looking really strong, and you still, play them down the road. There's a certain part of being like, okay, guys, look, our road to a Yates is likely going to be on the road, and we might need to accept that right now and just make the emphasis being healthy, and whether we're like, at the end of the day, just knowing that whether we're like, gosh, it kind of blows my mind to think that the possibility of maybe Guelph in that 7-2 matchup. I mean, I don't think it's going to fall to that standpoint, but wherever it breaks out, whether it's a 7-2 matchup, a 6-3, a 5-4, or if you are still maybe hosting that first round of playoffs, you're gonna, after that quarterfinal matchup, be going on the road. Accept that reality and just focus on getting healthy. And when we make the run in the end of the year, we'll rename it from the Guelph Griffins to the Guelph Sandbaggers. And we'll just say, yeah, we were just, playing possum early in the year. Can't leave this commentary without shouting out our guy and Ethan Martin making his homecoming debut. Odd seeing him in the purple, but just great seeing the doctor back out there on the field. It was funny kind of talking to him afterwards of just his experience having not played football in I think almost like 2-3 years and just getting back into it. But, he finishes with 8 tackles, just that Sam positions we always talk about just the versatility. And when you have a great athlete and a smart player like Ethan is, you're going to be all over the field, as we saw in this one. Obviously great seeing Jackson McKay live on the field. I mean, tall kid. You can only I can only imagine in his track, sort of form, what it would look like watching him in a dead sprint. It must be, cool to see. And as well, an interesting thing at the coin toss that certainly caught our eye as well. And it was a lot of fun. Pick up on any of that, Tom, and final thoughts in general. But I think we have to address the coin toss because that was, given that we lost, maybe I don't love it as much, but I still love that move by Guelph. What happened?
That's the choice, my man. I mean, for the folks who have been following around, Andre Thompson, we think the world of, and we think he's really going to be a special player. He initially is committed to Western, participates in their spring practices, and then finds himself playing for the Guelph Griffins in this one. And being the London kid and everything else, well, he goes out with the captains at the coin toss, and you clearly say, hey, he's with us now. You had a potential to have him or whatever, but now he's over with us. And to me, I felt like that was a bit of a choice message, if that's, let's say, from the one coaching staff to the other coaching staff that have him here. You came at it with a very lighthearted and innocent look, but he's the hometown kid. He's the first time playing in front of everybody. They want to give him a no. There was some to that.
No, for sure. Because in my mind, I'm thinking like, I don't remember them letting Kanye Nethersall go out for the coin toss when they played Western in the playoffs last year. So it's not just like a London thing. I think there was a little bit extra sauce on that. And I mean, maybe not quite to the same extent of the Laurier Windsor game that you were in the house for, but like obviously a chippy game. Guelph Western, one of the great rivalries that we have. Awesome to be able to see it. And at the end of the game too, you could see that like, a word or a play here or there, the right or wrong, depending on how you want to frame it, words or whatever, could have escalated into something a little uglier because you could see tensions were really starting to flare, despite how lopsided it was there towards the end. But again, hey Guelph, hey, we have everything there, and that's where this frustration comes from. Now, I don't know if we have everything there because we're hurt, and that's where the despondentness and the sadness starts to leak in. But that's okay. Still love you to death. And going to be pulling for you going into Windsor next week because that's going to be tough. 7 p.m. September 6th, Western staying at home to take on the Ottawa GGs in a battle of the 2-0s. That'll be really fascinating to see. Tom, that's our OUA review, but we won't finish up the podcast until we take a little peek around the other U Sport conferences. It's not our full C2C breakdown, but we finished off the week 2 preview by kind of saying what games around the other 3 conferences we were most keeping our eyes on for. Tom, I'll first ask you to remind folks what it was going into this weekend that caught your attention and whether or not that's the same thing you're coming out of this weekend with sort of top of mind in terms of AUS, RSEQ, or CanWest football. So what was catching your eye going into the weekend and what caught your eye leaving the weekend?
Well, I'm staying the entire time in the Can West here because I've mentioned this previously. The more and more that I watch Can West football, the more I'm like, damn, this is some damn good football. So going into this, looking at the 3 matchups that were here, I was staring at that Manitoba versus UBC game because Manitoba really looked to be the top tier of the Can West last year, obviously with the upset in the playoffs here, and UBC and who was going to be at quarterback and everything else. And while it was a great game that saw UBC come away with it 21-9, the other 2 games were even more so exciting. I mean, you look at Alberta versus Saskatchewan and just where things were supposed to be and what our own thoughts were. Saskatchewan looks to be the best team in the Can West with Anton Ammonrood back at the helm, with Daniel Wee, with Seth Hundaby back from his stint with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Riker Frank still being there, like Rhett Varva. Like, this is a stacked team, and Alberta went toe to toe with them. The final score was 29-20, but there was a time where Alberta was winning and they looked really good. And Eli Hetlinger and what he was doing, like, this was great. But then you look at Calgary versus Regina that goes to overtime. The overtime games that we have been treated with so far this year across the country has been nothing short of fantastic, including coming back near the end. I mean, at one point in time, sorry, let me back things up here. Calgary has to score 19 points in the 4th quarter in order to tie this thing up, including scoring for it a touchdown with 6 seconds left to go in the game, and then going for the 2-point conversion to make it 36-35. And then the opening kickoff is a line drive that goes through the end zone for the Rouge and ties it up 36-36. There is no better Canadian experience in that regard. But Regina ultimately coming away with the victory in this one, getting the touchdown in the overtime. Have to give shout outs to this Regina squad. Marshall Erickson, running back for the Regina Rams, is a stud. 27 attempts, 113 on the ground, 4 touchdowns, including 57 yards in the air from some passing as well. Noah Peltier looks to be right back at the top of his game as well, but this Regina Rams squad had a really impressive game. I don't want to take anything away from Calgary because obviously coming back in this one was itself really great as well. I mean, David Jordan for Calgary, 23 for 38, 266 yards for 3 touchdowns and no picks. That's a hell of a game in itself. Matthew Clark for running back, 15 attempts, 109 yards and 1 on the ground. Like, this was just a great game, and it's why Can West fans have been talking to us for years saying, hey man, don't you sleep on Can West football. This is some of the most exciting in the country. So I kept my talents and my eyes on Can West, and I was not disappointed.
Well, and honestly, for the right reason, and frankly, even just going back to that UBC Regina game, for number one, getting to see Drew Viato in there for UBC, though a little banged up late in it. Man, oh man, does he look good for them? And I was joking with you, but not really joking. I mean, between Michael O'Connor leaving Ontario to go south and then end up at UBC, and now Viato leaving Ontario to go south and then end up at UBC. Hey, Blake Nill, keep your hands off our Ontario quarterbacks, all right? Because you keep getting these dudes. And for Manitoba as well, whether it was Tuchinski's best game, just that O-line looks so good. Braden Stubbs running behind them. I think they'll be all right, but it's kind of that same thing we're talking about the OUA is just when all these teams are looking so good that, you only have so many opportunities to be able to say, tough loss. We were at UBC and all these types of things, and being able to say, like, yeah, but you can't be doing that too many times, or else it's going to get late early. I love that call from you. Loving the Can West action so far this year. My attention going into the weekend was very much staring at RSEQ football with the Laval McGill game. And recognizing that the final score that we ended up getting, 37-15, again, it's hard with the TVA broadcast to be able to get the highlights and really get a sense of it. But, sort of to be expected with these clubs, but just the matchup at quarterback between Eloi La Tendresse Regimbald, ELR, and in the early going of the season, I think fair to say the Heck Crichton favorite in Arnaud Desjardins for Laval. Just that is sort of the past, the present, the future of RSEQ football at the quarterback position was just so exciting. And obviously didn't get to watch the game. ELR, not as impressive in the air on the day, 12 for 33, one touchdown, 185 yards, takes it for 11 attempts on the ground for 104 yards. And this is a Laval defense that we talked about when we did our AUS RSEQ and CanWest preview is just going to be one of the best in all of Canada this year. So, hey, a tough day for ELR, but for Arnaud Desjardins, I guess, again, a McGill squad that has some nice pieces. We know they got our guy JT Copeland-Lewis back there, but 25 for 28, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, and seeing obviously your guy in Olivier Cool getting the 9 receptions, 80 yards, and then the 1 touchdown, but then as well seeing Isaac Gayardetz, a receiver as well, putting up a big day for them. Angel Vital, who you had highlighted in East-West as being a guy who's really going to pop for them. Mathieu Roy running the ball as well. Just such a well-rounded team, and to no surprise, Laval's looking as good as they've ever been. But frankly, coming out of the weekend, the game I wanted to highlight was going to AUS football and seeing what Saint FX was doing against Acadia, the 35-0 drubbing that they put on them. And more than anything, I watched most of this game on review after the fact, and I just want to highlight how special a team I think Saint FX has right now. And I can't wait to see when they go up against Bishops, and I don't mean to overlook St. Mary's, and St. Mary's picked up a big win, and obviously the defense for St. Mary's looks like they're as strong as they were last week. We haven't seen them truly tested yet, but just thinking about St. FX and the upset they had last year to St. Mary's and losing, but just looking at Silas Fagnon, didn't know we were going to have him back this year. I thought he was done. He goes 25 for 38, 320 in the air and a touchdown, takes one on the ground for a touchdown as well. And they have not only Caleb Fogarty, who's the leading rusher in all of AUS football last year, but not realizing that, actually, it wasn't because he had, graduated out that Malcolm Bussey wasn't playing last year. He was just hurt. So you get the 2023 AUS MVP back in their backfield to go alongside the guy in Fogarty, who was the leading rusher last year. And Bussey ends up with 14 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. Caleb with 8 carries for 42 and a touchdown. Again, not knock your socks off production, but when you add that into knowing that you have Fagnon, one of the best quarterbacks in all of Canada, and he's got his guy in Ben Harrington back there who gets 6 catches for 73 yards, Zachary Hood, who gets 9 receptions for 139, a touchdown. I haven't really dove into Bishops yet this year, and we obviously know that Justin Quirion is arguably as good an option as there is, irrespective of conference, which again has me so excited to see how these two teams match up, and nothing against Bishops, but just knowing that this is maybe the last dance for some of those key guys on the Saint FX team that, as when we were talking about it, gave Saskatchewan a scare 2 years ago in that semifinal game before Sask ended up playing in that great Vanier Cup against Laval in London. A Saint FX, and this is much of that same core group. So, and especially just knowing the type of caliber coach that Gary Waterman is, Bishops, hey, again, with that defense they have, I haven't dove into them too much yet on the year to see what they've been able to do. But this is a Saint FX team that I kind of want to see be able to pull it off, win that Loney, and they'd be taking on presumptively Laval in that U Sport semifinal, which, hey, to me, I think this team can at least play with them. I don't, whether I'd pick them over them, the Saint FX team, I really, really like, and they showed some great things against an Acadia squad that looked promising coming out early, but just couldn't handle this offensive attack for Saint FX. So that's what caught my eye. Loving AUS football, because the same way we talk about OUA football being better when the Yorks and the Tronls and the Waterloos play better, U Sports football is better when AUS football can tout out, hey, look, we got Bishops looking great. We got Saint FX looking great. And if any of those teams ever sleep on St. Mary's, that defense that they have, those ball hawks they have in the secondary will make you pay for it. So I'm loving the state of U Sport football across the field right now, and it's certainly made for some fun conversations that we've had about the top 10 in U Sport and what crossover games might look like. So just really happy with the production out of AUS. Obviously, seeing what I'd say again, the Heck Crichton favorite in Arnaud Desjardins did this weekend was great, and all that great Can West football on top of an amazing OUA slate we had made for just an outstanding week 2 or week 1 of football in Can West circles for the weekend. And so happy I got to enjoy so much of it with you, my friend. Tom, outstanding job as always. Final thoughts on a terrific weekend of U Sport football.
Man, like we've always had such an appreciation for U Sports football. Started with just the OUA, and as we've expanded out, really just getting that appreciation for how great football in Canada really is. There's exciting games across the country. There's outstanding players across the country and Canadian talent playing at some of the very highest of levels here. Folks, if I said it once, I'll say it a million times. I encourage you, get out to as many games as you possibly can. We'll dive into this a little later on, maybe in the next couple of weeks or so, but I'm taking my talents out to the Can West. I'm going to catch a game in person in a couple of weeks' time here to really see this. Zach and I are thinking it's sounding like we're going to go to Quebec City and check out a Laval Rouge or game. And so we're making the attempts. We're expanding out our coverage here to start really focusing on the majority of U Sports football. But I encourage all of you, get out in person and watch these great teams. I guarantee you will not regret it. These have been fantastic games across. And it's just week 2 for the OUA. It just started up for everybody else. We are barely scratching the surface of what this season is going to look like, and it's already fantastic.
You're absolutely right. And obviously, we're still waiting to have our formal conversation with the OUA folks to talk about all the planning that went in with the OUA TV paid model and sort of what we can expect that to sort of net out in the future. And we have been privileged to have been in the house for so many of these games, and it seems like we missed the games in specific that most people were sort of railing against in terms of the lack of production. So in some regards, we've been lucky to not have to do that. But I'll say it just at this point, hey, it's not going anywhere. The paywall is there. Hopefully we get a little more clarity on what it's going to get us, what we're going to promise, just beyond the fact that like these programs just need the money as well. Like that is just, we did speculate that was part of it, just being like, hey guys, like at a certain point, there's one thing to be able to say that like, here's what you're going to get from it. It's another being able to say it might just be as simple as we just can't keep doing this without bringing something in. And hopefully we're hoping to still have that interview, whether it's with Gord Grace or someone from the OUA to just get a better sense of it. But at the end of the day, like you're going to miss out. You're just going to miss out. So if you're not able to get to those games, because we know not everyone can, pay the fee or find someone who has it and watch it. And even if the stream's not great, just if you truly love football, because as Tom, as you were just saying, like it frustrating though it's been, it's like at a certain point, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. And you're either going to have to say, I'm going to just have to follow through podcasts like ours. And as always, wherever you're listening from, whenever you're listening from or watching, thank you so much. And we do our best to bring you all the details you need to be able to do to fill in with box scores, what's going on. But if you really want to enjoy it, hey, get out to a game or just pay the money. That's it, whether we like it or not, that's what it is. And you're going to miss out. But get out to the games because these stadiums are fantastic. The crowds come out in full force. That we got to work on keeping the kids in the stands. Come on, Western. You filled it up at the start, and just like that halftime hit, and I'm sure they were all at seeps. That is week 2 for you. Again, thank you so much. Like, share, subscribe, the 5 stars, all that goes a long way for us. Keep the comments going. We want to do the best we can to reflect what you're thinking about on this platform that we have to be able to, again, keep this conversation going, cover the sports to the best of our abilities. We have an exciting week 3 that's coming up quickly with that Friday game in Kingston between Laurier and Queens. So we're going to have to do our thinking because there's a lot of processing I'm going to have to go through with these matchups we have coming up next week. So we'll be setting up week 3 for you next week, or later on this week, I should say, right here at the 55.